You're listening to The Two-Headed Serpent, Surviving a Narcissistic Mother. This is not a book meant to be rushed. It is not background noise, and it is not written for casual listening. This book was written to be entered slowly. What follows is not a story about blame. It is a record of survival, a descent into memory, pattern, and truth, a journey through childhood, identity, and the long shadow cast by a parent who could not see the child before them. You will hear the voice of the child. You will hear the voice of the man. And at times, you may hear your own. These chapters are not instructions. They are reflections. They are recognitions. They are moments of clarity that often arrive only after long confusion. If something resonates, pause. If something unsettles you, pause there too. This is not a book about fixing your past. It is about naming it, and in naming it, loosening its grip. You do not need to agree with everything you hear. You only need to listen honestly. This is an invitation, not a demand. A remembering, not a performance. A movement toward truth, not away from pain. When you are ready, begin. This audiobook is published by Soul Anchor Publishing LLC and is narrated by Sean Clark Christensen. All rights reserved. No part of this audiobook may be reproduced, distributed, transmitted, or shared in any form or by any means, electronic or mechanical, including recording, copying, or storage in any information retrieval system, without prior written permission from the publisher, except where permitted by law. Disclaimer: this audiobook is intended for educational, philosophical, and reflective purposes only. It does not provide medical, psychological, legal, or financial advice. The content reflects personal insights, experiences, and interpretations offered for contemplation and personal understanding. Any actions you take as a result of listening are your own responsibility. Listener discretion is advised. Dedication. For my sons, Ethan, Liam, Cash, and Nils, the bright inheritance of my heart, the reason my story bends toward hope. May you always know a love that protects, a love that lifts, a love that frees. For my brothers and sister, fellow travelers through the same childhood labyrinth, may the child within each of you find rest, recognition, and release. For Uncle David and Aunt Sharon, the two warriors who stepped into the storm and pulled us from the Serpent's house, you were the first to say, "To hell with her, I am taking them." You risked everything when no one else would. And for every child who survived by becoming invisible, this is your testimony too. You were not crazy. You were not imagining it. You were surviving. Sean Clark Christensen. So mote it be. Epigraph. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Matthew 18:6, KJV. The child who survives the serpent does not emerge unscathed, but neither does he emerge broken. He becomes the soul warrior, the one who carries fire into the darkness, breaks the ancestral chains, and walks forward bearing the light no one ever gave him. Sean Clark Christensen. Forward. There are wounds that age does not heal, and shadows that time cannot erase. The mystics call these shadows the mother wound, the fracture that forms when the one who is meant to give life instead gives confusion, when the one who is meant to protect instead becomes the storm. This book rises from that wound, from the cries of a child who was never heard, from the silence he was forced to swallow, and from the ashes he grew through, without knowing he was growing at all. For every child raised beneath the rule of a wounded parent, there is an exile of the soul, a wandering in deserts unseen, a seeking of love in barren lands, a reaching for tenderness where none exists. Yet the ancient texts taught us this truth: what is cast into darkness is not destroyed. It is preserved, hidden until the day the soul is strong enough to reclaim what was taken. And Jung taught us another: the shadow is not where evil lives. It is where the abandoned child waits. This is the story of that child, the one who stood before the serpent and survived, the one who learned early that love with fangs is still called love by those who gave it, the one who carried wounds not on his skin, but in the chambers of his spirit. And this is also the story of the man, the soul warrior, who returned for him, who descended into the deep, into the memories that burned, into the shadows that trembled, and said to the frightened boy, "You will not remain here. I am your rescuer now. I am your shelter. I am your future." Healing is a sacred act, a holy rebellion, a resurrection of the self that pain tried to bury, a gathering of broken pieces, the way ancient prophets gathered scattered tribes, not to erase their past, but to restore their name. Every survivor of the mother wound knows this path, the path of questioning your memories, your sanity, your worth, and your right to speak. But the scriptures say, "The truth shall make you free," and the deeper truth is this: the serpent did not destroy the child. The child became the warrior the serpent feared he would become. If you hold this book, you are already on the edge of your own awakening, your own pilgrimage into shadow, your own rising into light. Walk gently, walk slowly, walk bravely, for in these pages, the lost child learns to speak, the mother wound is named, and the soul warrior stands up from the dust, lifts the child into his arms, and carries him home. This is not merely a story. This is scripture written in the language of survival. This is prophecy fulfilled through courage. This is the return of the soul to itself. A father's preface. This book was written by a father who could not always be physically present. Not by choice, not without effort, not without cost. Life doesn't always unfold the way we intend. Time, distance, and circumstances can separate people, even when love remains intact. When that happens, responsibility doesn't disappear, it changes form. These pages are my way of remaining present, not as a replacement for time together, not as an explanation of the past, but as guidance offered steadily, honestly, and without condition. Everything in this book reflects how I believe a person grows strong not through force, fear, or perfection, but through awareness, discipline, responsibility, and the courage to return to what was lost. These lessons are not meant to control your life. They are meant to help you carry it. Some of what's written here may feel obvious. Some of it may not make sense right away. That's okay. Wisdom doesn't arrive all at once. It settles over time, often when you're ready for it. You don't need to read this book quickly. You don't need to agree with everything. You don't need to become anyone else. My hope is simple, that when you need steadiness, clarity, or perspective, you'll find it here. This is how I show up. This is how I guide. This is how I remain a father through words that are meant to last. Sean Clark Christensen. Why this book exists. There is a moment in every survivor's life when silence stops being protection and starts becoming a prison. For me, that moment came after decades of trying to outrun a childhood that refused to stay buried. For years, I believed I owed the world my strength and owed myself nothing. I believed that if I stayed quiet, if I stayed grateful, if I stayed small, I could rise above what happened to me. But the truth is simple. You cannot rise above something you refuse to face, and you cannot heal a wound you keep pretending never existed. This book is not written from bitterness. It is not written to expose, embarrass, or destroy. It is written from a place of deep clarity, the clarity that comes only after walking through your own darkness and emerging on the other side with compassion instead of anger. This is a book about truth, healing, and reclamation. It is the story of my inner child, the small boy who endured more than a child ever should, and the man I became, who finally returned for him and refused to abandon him again. It is also a book for every survivor who has ever questioned their memories, their sanity, their worth, or their right to speak. If you were raised by a narcissistic parent or guardian, you know that the wound is not just what happened. The wound is the confusion, the self-doubt, the longing, the spiritual conflict, and the desperate hunger to be loved by someone who simply did not know how to love. You are not alone. Your story is real, and what you feel is valid. I also wrote this book for my brothers and sister, the ones who have not yet found their voice, who carry their own memories in silence, who have been healing in whatever ways they can just to make it through another day. This book is for them too, for the inner children still waiting inside them, the ones who never had the chance to speak, who lived through the same household, the same storms, the same patterns born from the same wound. This is not meant to pull them back into pain, but to remind them gently that they are loved, that they are protected, and that I see them, even if they may not see me. Their silence is not weakness. Their survival is not invisibility. Their story matters too. I wrote this book to give my inner child a voice, but I also wrote it so that you might hear your own voice echo somewhere within these pages. Not to reopen old wounds, but to remind you that you survived, that you are not broken, and that the path toward healing grows clearer when we finally dare to speak out loud what once lived only in the shadows. This book is raw. It is honest. It is, at times, painful, but it is also filled with grace and with forgiveness. Because I believe that even those who harmed us were souls carrying their own heavy journeys. I believe my mother, now free from the burdens of this world, has become the version of herself she always longed to be. Clear, loving, whole. I honor that version of her while still telling the truth of what I lived. This is not a book about blame. This is a book about becoming, about reclaiming the pieces of yourself that were lost in a childhood of confusion and survival. About weaving the broken parts with the healed ones until you can finally see yourself not as a victim, but as a survivor, and eventually, as the creator of your own destiny. If you have picked up this book, I hope you will walk through it gently. Move slowly. Pause when you need to. Let your heart breathe. And know that the deeper you go, the more light you will find on the other side. This is my story. This is your story. And in many ways, it is all of our stories. And now, together, we walk in freedom. Acknowledgements. When the serpent speaks, the child awakens. I did not intend to write this book. For most of my life, I tried to bury these memories beneath oceans, continents, distances, and years of silence. I convinced myself that forgetting was healing, that distance was freedom, that survival was the same thing as peace. But wounds that come from a mother do not disappear. They echo, they shape the soul, they whisper in the dark, they form the architecture of a child's identity, and they birth the anger, the confusion, the rage, the uncertainty, and the self-destruction that rise in a young man long before he understands pain or the meaning of true love. For years, I called those whispers strength. I called the numbness manhood. I called the scars maturity. I did not dare call them what they truly were, the remains of a small, unprotected, terrified child living in the shadow of a two-headed serpent. I held on to a myth for years that perhaps she would change, or remember, or awaken to the destruction she left behind. I believed, as wounded children do, that if I could just be better, quieter, stronger, more forgiving, more obedient, more understanding, she might finally love me and love my sons, the way mothers are meant to love their children and grandmothers their grandchildren. But she never did. Not once. Not even on her dying day did she repent or show remorse. And then one day, the serpent spoke again. A message simple, venomous, unmistakable, arrived in the same voice that shaped my earliest fears. The words were not new. They were ancient, rehearsed, sharpened by decades of denial, and polished by the lie she wrapped around herself so she would never have to face what she had done. But this time, something changed. This time, the words did not land on the boy. They landed on the man. And with that impact came clarity. I saw the manipulation. I saw the rage behind the false holiness. I saw the rewriting of memory, the projection, the blame shifting, the spiritual guilt, the counterfeit love that always signaled another strike. I saw the serpent's two heads, clearly the charmer and the destroyer. And I realized something I had never allowed myself to say aloud. You cannot heal what you refuse to name. You cannot free the child while protecting the serpent. You cannot reclaim your story while burying the truth. So, I opened the vault. I reached into the darkness and pulled the frightened, hurting, unprotected little boy out of the shadows. I listened to his voice, the voice I silenced for decades, the voice that trembled but refused to die. And I made him a promise. Tell your story. I will not turn away again. This time, I will not let the serpent silence you. This book is the fulfillment of that promise. It is not written to shame. It is not written to accuse. It is not written to destroy anyone who has passed or anyone still living. It is written for one purpose, to give the inner child inside me the dignity he was never granted when he needed it most. This book is told in two voices. The first is the voice of the child, the boy who loved, feared, hoped, and survived, under the rule of a woman who called herself Mommy, yet carried the heart of a serpent. The second is the voice of the man, the survivor, the witness, the soul warrior, who chose healing over inheritance, truth over silence, and freedom over fear. When these two voices finally meet child and man, their truth becomes this. This is not the story of a monster. It is the story of a child, my inner child, who was led into the wilderness and made to stand before a two-headed serpent. And it is the story of the man he became, the man who walked back into that wilderness not with anger, but with compassion, seeking the frightened boy he once was. He found that child trembling in the shadows, lifted him gently into his arms, and whispered, "You are loved. You are safe now." And in that moment, the man was remade, strong, courageous, restored a soul resurrected not by vengeance, but by mercy for the child he once had been. This is how he learned to live again. This is not a tale of revenge. It is a tale of reclamation. And this is not the beginning of my trauma. This is the beginning of my freedom. Legal disclaimer. This book is a work of autobiographical fiction. It is inspired by the author's lived experiences, reflections, and emotional truths, but it is presented in fictionalized form to protect privacy. All names, characters, locations, and identifying details have been altered, obscured, or created for narrative purposes. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, is coincidental and unintentional. Events within this narrative have been condensed, rearranged, or reimagined for thematic clarity and dramatic structure. Dialogue has been reconstructed or created to convey emotional accuracy rather than literal transcription. This work is not a factual record, investigative account, or historical document. The themes explored childhood, trauma, memory, and healing reflect the author's subjective experience. Nothing within this book should be interpreted as legal, clinical, psychological, or therapeutic advice. It does not seek to assign fault, allege misconduct, or depict any identifiable individual. This text is a literary exploration of memory and transformation. It is fiction shaped by lived experience, not a documentary statement of fact. Please give your full attention to the author, the man who lived this journey and who rose from it as the soul warrior. And now, your narrator, Mr. Sean Clark Christensen.
Hello, my name is Sean Clark Christensen. I am the author and now the narrator, and I want to welcome you to a story that was never supposed to be told. This is The Two-Headed Serpent, Surviving a Narcissistic Mother, the first book in the Two-Headed Serpent Chronicles, published by Soul Anchor Publishing. Before we begin, I need to be clear about something. This is not a gentle book. It is not a comfortable listen. It does not offer quick fixes or feel-good platitudes about healing and moving on. What you're about to hear is a testimony, a record of survival, a child's voice finally speaking the truth that was never allowed to be spoken while he lived through it. This audiobook contains detailed accounts of childhood abuse, psychological manipulation, parental alienation, and complex trauma. The experiences described are real. The pain is real. The wounds are real. If you are a survivor of narcissistic abuse, childhood trauma, or psychological control, please know this. You may find yourself in these pages. You may hear echoes of your own story. That is intentional. This book was written for you to tell you that you were not crazy, you were not imagining it, and you did not deserve what happened to you. If you are listening as a parent, a therapist, a researcher, or simply as someone seeking to understand how trauma shapes a life, I ask that you listen with compassion and discernment. All rights reserved. This audiobook, along with the written text, is protected by copyright and published by Soul Anchor Publishing and the author, Sean Clark Christensen. Any reproduction, distribution, or unauthorized use of this material is prohibited. The people in this story are real. The events are real. Some names have been changed to protect privacy, but the truth of what occurred remains unaltered. Listen at your own discretion. Honor your own capacity. Pause when you need to. And if necessary, seek support. This is my story and my lifelong journey. Let's begin. In loving memory to my mother, Kathleen Jo Adams, November 2nd, 2025. A tribute in the language of light. In the quiet beyond this world, where souls rise unburdened, and every tear is lifted from the spirit, I believe you now stand whole. Not as the woman weighed down by sorrow, nor as the mother shaped by her own unhealed wounds, but as the radiant being you were always meant to be, clear as morning, gentle as breath, restored in the light of the one who understands all things. For it is written in every sacred story, what is bound on earth is loosed in heaven, and the pain that once shaped your life has now fallen away like dust from the feet of a traveler. Finally home, I honor that new beginning. I honor the spirit that has awakened, beyond the limits of this world. I believe you see clearly now. Your eyes no longer clouded by fear, your heart no longer guarded by old shadows, your soul no longer divided by the battles you carried alone. And in that clarity, I believe you can finally see me, not through the veil of this life, but through the purity of truth and love that exists only where the spirit is free. In that place beyond pain, I imagine you standing in the warmth of divine light, your burdens lifted, your sorrow healed, your heart softened into the mother I always hoped you could be. I forgive the woman you were. I bless the soul you are now, and I look forward to the day when all things hidden are revealed, all wounds are mended, and all love is restored. When that day comes, we will meet again, not as mother and child divided by a broken world, but as two souls, recognizing each other in perfect peace. Until then, rest in the sanctuary of the light, healed, shining, finally free. When the serpent speaks, the child awakens. And when the child awakens, the story can no longer stay buried. For most of my life, I tried to outdistance these memories. I crossed oceans. I changed states. I buried the past beneath work, fatherhood, discipline, silence. I convinced myself that distance was healing, that forgetting was growth, that survival was the same thing as peace. It wasn't. Wounds that come from a mother do not disappear. They echo. They shape the nervous system. They form the architecture of identity long before a boy understands pain or love or betrayal. They whisper in the dark. For years, I mistook those whispers for strength. I called the numbness resilience. I called the hypervigilance awareness. I called the anger masculinity. I did not dare call it what it truly was. A small, unprotected, terrified child, learning to live in the shadow of a two-headed serpent. One head charmed, one head struck. One spoke of faith, morality, righteousness. The other delivered shame, rage, blame, and spiritual confusion wrapped in the language of love. I held onto a myth for decades, that maybe she would awaken, that maybe she would remember, that maybe one day she would look at me and see the damage clearly enough to name it. Wounded children believe this. They believe that if they become better, quieter, stronger, more forgiving, more obedient, more understanding, love will finally arrive. It didn't. Not once. Not even at the end. And then one day, long after I believed I had built a life beyond it, the serpent spoke again. The message was simple. Venom rarely needs many words. The tone was familiar. The distortion was practiced. The rewriting of history was polished by years of denial. But this time, something was different. The words did not land on the boy. They landed on the man. And when they did, clarity came with them. I saw the manipulation without confusion. I saw the projection without absorbing it. I saw the spiritual guilt for what it was. I saw the false holiness masking unresolved rage. I saw both heads clearly, and I understood something I had avoided my entire life. You cannot heal what you refuse to name. You cannot free the child while protecting the serpent. You cannot reclaim your story while defending the person who fractured it. So, I stopped running. I opened the vault I had kept sealed. I reached into the dark interior rooms of memory, and I found him. The boy, still small, still watchful, still carrying questions he was never allowed to ask. I listened to him, to the confusion, to the fear, to the longing for safety that never came consistently, and I made him a promise. I will not silence you again. I will not explain this away. I will not protect what harmed you. This book is the fulfillment of that promise. It is not written to shame. It is not written for revenge. It is not written to desecrate the dead or attack the living. It is written to restore dignity to a child who survived something he did not have language for. Part 1 will be told in his voice. The child who loved, feared, hoped, and endured. Part 2 will be told in the voice of the man who returned for him. The man who chose truth over denial, clarity over loyalty to dysfunction, and healing over inherited silence. When those voices meet, something changes. This is not the story of a monster. It is the story of a child led into confusion and forced to survive it. And it is the story of the man who walked back into that wilderness not to fight, not to punish, but to retrieve the boy who was left there. He found him. He lifted him. And he said the words no one else did. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not the problem. You are safe now. This is not a tale of revenge. It is a reclamation, and it is not the beginning of trauma. It is the beginning of freedom. Introduction. The two-headed serpent. The serpent in the garden. Hiss, hiss. I feel bad for you. That is how a narcissist mommy begins her assault, not with comfort, not with compassion, but with a blade dipped in pity so she can cut you and call the wound love. In every ancient scripture, the serpent appears twice, first as the charmer, then as the destroyer. The old oracles warned long ago, the serpent does not reveal its fangs at first. It begins with its voice soft, soothing, almost holy, the kind of creature that arrives as an angel of light, a whisper that tastes like truth, a tone that feels like safety, a presence that masquerades as protection. The serpent beguiles before it bites. So when a narcissist mommy murmurs, I feel bad for you, that is not tenderness. It is the first hiss, the first charm, the first head of the serpent coiling around your heart with a promise it never intends to honor. This is the first head, the beguiler, the charmer, the illusion of love. It convinces you she understands. It convinces you she cares. It convinces you tragically that perhaps this time you might finally be safe in her hands. But the serpent has two heads. One draws you near, the other devours you. The second head waits in silence, coiled in patience, fangs polished in venom, purpose sharpened in shadow. And the instant the child reaches for tenderness, the moment trust replaces doubt, the second head rises. Its strike carries no truth, only venom. You're broken. You're sick. You're the reason for everything wrong. Nobody needs you. Nobody wants you. You should never have existed. This is the serpent's true tongue. This is the venom behind her voice. Then comes the crushing, the emotional tightening, the collapse of confidence, the erosion of identity, the theft of worth. A narcissist. Mommy holds her child the way a constrictor holds prey, not to comfort, but to overpower, to drain the spirit until the child questions his right to breathe. She blesses with one tongue and curses with the other. She hugs with one hand and wounds with the other. She whispers, I love you with the same mouth that spits. You're as useless as a tit on a bull. This is spiritual warfare in the clothing of motherhood. This is the serpent in maternal disguise. This is the charm and the strike twisted into the same woman. And the child yearning for a mother he will never receive is left fighting something more lethal than hatred. Confusion. Because the deadliest part is believing the first head, the soft one, the gentle one, the loving one is the real mother, while the second head is already closing around his throat. And when the serpent finally exposes itself, its words arrive exactly as they were cast at me. Get up and fix your own life. Everything wrong is your fault. You're a failure. You're sick. Stay away from me. I have no need for you. These are not lessons. These are abandonment dressed as righteousness. Then comes the diversion. Your suffering came from someone else. Your pain belongs to others. Your wounds are not my doing. This is the smokescreen, the evasion of responsibility, the serpent shedding its guilt like old skin. Then the rearranging of memory. I never harmed you. I never mistreated you. Prove your pain. Name the moment. A serpent never seeks clarity. A serpent seeks ammunition. When that fails, the serpent strikes at the angels who ever dared to protect the child. Your protector didn't love you. Your caregiver never cared. You were a burden. Even the one who sheltered you did it for money. She never loved you. She only wanted the wage you brought. Destroy the angels, and the child is left defenseless. And then the final twist of the serpent's nature, the counterfeit holiness. I'm praying for you. I love you. Jehovah loves you. I always have. You were my firstborn. This is not love. This is the ritual blessing before the next attack. This is the cycle. Charm, wound, deny, accuse, shame, abandon, and finally, the false blessing to reset the snare. This is the voice of a narcissist mommy. This is the anatomy of the two-headed serpent. And this is where the little boy's story begins, not in Eden, not in paradise, not in warmth, but in a childhood garden ruled by a serpent who dared to call herself Mommy.
The Firstborn in the Garden. Chapter 1. Inner Child Voice. The Garden Child. Innocent. Hopeful. Trusting. Enchanted. I don't remember the day I was born, but I remember the feeling of being first. The first heartbeat in Mommy's arms. The first eyes she ever looked into. The first tiny hand she held. The first child in a house that felt unfinished, but full of promise. I came into the world in a place called Banner Elk, North Carolina. a name that sounded like forest magic to me. Daddy's family came from Scotland and Ireland, from old names Mommy whispered sometimes. The Forbes, the Gordons, the Stewarts, the Bruces. I didn't know what royal blood meant, but Grandma said I was the apple of her eye. And when she held me, I believed her. Banner elk felt like mountains, leaning close to watch over me, and deer walking softly through quiet, secret trees. Mommy was 18. I didn't know what 18 meant, only that she felt young, like she was still learning how to live, while trying to learn how to love me. Daddy was 24, with strong southern hands that smelled of hard work, engine oil, and warm old spice, a scent that made me feel safe before I even knew what safety was. People said he came from the Smoky Mountains. In my little mind, that meant giants wandering in fog, mornings rolling over Grandfather Mountain like blankets pulled across the sky, and old Scottish fables the wind carried down the hills. Mommy came from California, a place she spoke about like it was both home and heartbreak. She said her mama was Italian, fast moving and fierce, with hands that never paused, and a voice that traveled through walls like weather. She said her daddy painted tanks in the army and carried sadness, the way other men carried tools. I didn't understand sadness yet, but I understood storms, and Mommy always talked like she had one hidden inside her. Still, in the beginning, life felt like a garden. North Carolina grass was soft on my bare feet. Fireflies blinked like wandering stars that had fallen too low. Nights were warm, thick with crickets, whispering their songs into the dark. Daddy was tall, tall as the mountains that guarded our home. He lifted me so high, I felt like I could touch the sky. Mommy watched me, eyes shifting between sunlight and shadow, but always watching. I was the only child, just me, just my laughter filling rooms that echoed with possibility. Being first felt like being chosen. Before Daddy disappeared, before Grandma and Pawpaw disappeared, before new babies came, before love thinned and divided, before Mommy's voice learned to thunder, before Mommy's hands made tears spill down my cheeks, before doors slammed, before shadows stretched long across the floors, before I learned that gardens can hide serpents in tall grass. But that was later. In the beginning, my beginning, I was the firstborn in the garden, and for a little while the world was warm and gentle, and I believed I was wanted before the shadows came. Adult voice reflection, soul warrior, protector of the child within, addressing the inner child. Come here, little man. Sit with me a moment. Let me talk to you about that beginning. You remember the garden, the warm place before the shadows came? I see you there, running barefoot through North Carolina grass, your small hands reaching for fireflies, your laughter echoing like it belonged to the whole mountain. I see the wonder in your eyes when Daddy lifted you high, and the way your little heart believed this was what love would always feel like. I see the way Mommy watched you, sometimes soft, sometimes stormy, and how you tried, even then, to read her weather. You were so little, too little to understand the grown-up storms brewing around you, too little to see the cracks in the walls and the shadows slipping under the door, too little to know the garden you were born into was already trembling. You didn't see the serpent yet. You didn't know it had two heads. You didn't know it had been crawling through the family line long before you arrived. You didn't know it whispered through broken histories and unhealed wounds, searching for the next place to strike. All you knew was that you were first, the first heartbeat, the first little light, the first child held in arms that didn't yet know how to hold their own pain. And you, little man, you loved with your whole chest. You trusted the world in front of you because no one had taught you to fear it yet. You believed you were chosen because in the beginning you were. But let me tell you something gently, something you couldn't have known then. The warmth you felt was real, and so were the shadows forming behind it. You were too small to see the storms in Mommy's childhood that she never healed from. Too small to see the pain she carried like a second skin. Too small to see how her wounds were becoming the serpent's first whisper. But I see it now. I see the beauty of those early days and the tragedy of what was already unfolding. I see the innocence in your eyes and the danger growing just beyond your sight. And I need you to hear me. You were not naive. You were not blind. You were a child who deserved gentleness, safety, continuity, and love without conditions. Those early moments of warmth were not tricks. They were gifts, seeds of truth you carried with you through every dark chapter that followed. And I honor that boy. I honor the wonder in him, the softness, the hope. I honor the way he kept believing, even when the shadows grew long. I'm here now to stand beside him, beside you, and tell you what no one told you then. You were wanted. You were cherished. You were never the cause of what came next. And the garden you lost will bloom again, not behind you, but ahead of you. You don't have to walk back into the dark alone. I'm here. I'm holding your hand now, and together we will walk into the light that was always meant for you. The First Father Taken, Chapter 2. Inner child voice, the confused child, stunned by loss, bewildered, trying to understand adult choices. I remembered Daddy in pieces, not all at once, but like watching someone walk away through fog. Sometimes he lifted me onto his shoulders, and I felt tall enough to touch the clouds. Sometimes he laughed, and it sounded like summer porch boards softly creaking under bare feet. Sometimes his eyes turned sad when he didn't think I was looking. I didn't know why. I didn't know anything about grown-up storms, or secrets, or fear. I only knew that Mommy and Daddy's voices sometimes turned fast and sharp, the kind that made my stomach twist, like something inside me was bracing for impact. I remember Mommy crying, then yelling, then whispering words that made the air colder even when the house was warm. I remember laughter that wasn't laughter, like it cracked in the middle. I remember doors slamming hard enough to hush the fireflies outside. I remember Daddy leaving, and the whole house leaning toward the door, as if it missed him too. Mommy said Daddy did bad things. She said it often, like she needed the story to stay solid so it didn't slip away. She said his mama, my grandma, wanted to take me. She said she was protecting me. But Mommy's kind of protection always felt like losing someone. Then one day, Grandma from California came to North Carolina. She and Mommy packed bags and clothes and toys and me. They said we were going home, but I thought home was wherever Daddy's arms were. And then we left, just like that. No goodbye I could remember, no last hug, no last bit of Daddy's old spice, no last look at his face, just gone. When we reached California, Mommy told me things that made my chest hurt in ways I didn't have words for. She said Daddy didn't want you anymore. She said Daddy didn't want to pay for you. She said Daddy has a new wife now, a new family, and he moved on. The words felt like falling down a staircase inside my own heart. I was only 4. I didn't understand money or marriage or moving on. I only knew I cried for Daddy, and he wasn't there to hear me. Mommy's words were heavy, too heavy for a child, but I carried them anyway, because she said them, and I didn't know how not to believe her. We moved in with a new man, quiet voice, gentle hands. Mommy said he would be my new daddy. She said he chose me. She said I belonged to this new family now. She said I could be like my older brothers. She said I could have their last name and leave the old one behind. But the old one was Daddy, and I didn't know how to leave a father I still cried for in the dark. They got married, and sometime after that, papers were signed, grown-up papers I never saw, and my first daddy disappeared from my name, from my story, from the place where a father is supposed to stand. I lost my name before I ever learned to spell it. I lost my father before I ever learned how to hold on to him. I lost where I came from before I understood what it meant. Mommy said all of it was for my protection. But all I felt was emptiness, a quiet hole shaped like Daddy's hands. I didn't have words then, only the ache, a small ache, too young to speak, but too real to fade. And the ache whispered the truth. Daddy didn't leave because he didn't love me. Daddy left because someone took him away. Adult voice reflection, soul warrior, protector of the child within, addressing the inner child. Come here, little man, sit with me. Let me hold this memory with you. I see how you felt when your daddy vanished from your world like a light suddenly switched off. I see the tremble in your small chest when mommy told you he didn't love you anymore, didn't want to pay for you, made a new family without you. Those words should never have been handed to a child, but they were, and I know how heavy they fell inside you. I see how you cried for him, how rooms felt too big without his arms, how you whispered daddy into the dark long after everyone else stopped saying his name. I see how it wounded you to lose grandma, who called you her apple, to lose pawpaw, to lose the whole family in North Carolina that wrapped you in belonging. All of it taken from you in a single moment and one unseen signature. And you, little man, you were too small to understand the grown-up choices made above your head. Too small to see the lies forming. Too small to recognize the serpent in the garden, the two-headed one lifting itself from the weeds. You didn't know it began here, with the taking of your father, the tearing of your name. The whisper slipped into your soft ears. He didn't love you. You weren't wanted. Your family is gone. You didn't know those whispers were poison, that they were not truth, but the serpent's first hiss. You didn't see where the egg cracked open in the quiet weeds of North Carolina, and later in the shadow of California's palm trees. But I see it now. I see the moment the serpent rose. I see where innocence was stolen and the wound took root. And I'm here now, little man. I'm not letting you face that serpent alone. Because the truth is this: your daddy didn't leave because you weren't enough. He didn't disappear because you weren't loved. You were taken. The seed of parent alienation was planted in your story long before you understood its name. The ache you carried was never your fault. The emptiness you felt was not the truth, it was the serpent's hiss. I see your courage now, the boy who survived the first strike without knowing what struck him. And I'm here, holding you, protecting you, reminding you, you were wanted, you were loved, and you will never face the serpent alone again. When Mommy Became Thunder, Chapter 3. Inner Child Voice, the Overlooked Child. Jealousy, displacement, shrinking identity. I didn't know the world could change just because another baby arrived. I was small, small enough to still believe that love stayed the same shape forever and Mommy's arms always had room for me. But then one day, a tiny bundle came home in her arms, wrapped tight like a secret, smelling like warm milk and brand new beginnings. Mommy said he was my baby brother. She said I was a big boy now. She said it like a crown she was placing on my head. But it felt more like a weight, because suddenly her hands were full of bottles, full of blankets, full of someone who wasn't me. I tried to help. I brought diapers, patted tiny spit bubbles, rocked a bassinet with hands still learning gentleness. And sometimes, Mommy smiled at me the way she used to, but only for a second, like sunlight slipping through clouds before the sky closed again. People came to see him. They said he was tiny, precious, perfect. I stood beside them, quiet, hoping someone would look at me with the same kind of wonder. But wonder is louder when it's new, and I wasn't new anymore. Later came more brothers, too older, and suddenly the house was crowded in ways I didn't have words for. They laughed louder than me. They ran faster. They seemed to fit into something I didn't understand. I became the middle child before I even knew what middle meant, before I learned that middle sometimes means invisible. And Mommy changed too. Her voice sharpened when my footsteps weren't quick enough. Her hands got rough when she told me to move, be quiet, help more. It was like she had two versions of herself, one for the babies, soft and gentle, and one for me, loud and unpredictable. Sometimes she called me her helper, her big boy, her firstborn. And sometimes I was the one she grabbed too tightly, the one she snapped at, the one she blamed for things I didn't understand. I didn't have words for it then, but I felt it. Something heavy, something shifting, something that took the softness out of the air and replaced it with thunder. The thunder wasn't my brother's. The thunder was Mommy. It was the way her voice erupted over small accidents. It was the sound of her footsteps shaking the hallway. It was the feeling that love had turned into weather I had to survive. I learned to watch her the way you watch storms, careful, quiet, never sure when the lightning would come. My baby brother didn't know the weather, but I did. I felt every temperature change, every rumble, every sudden cold wind that whispered, "Be careful, be smaller, don't make her angry." I didn't know the word for it then, fear, loss, jealousy, hurt, but I knew the feeling of love slipping through fingers I couldn't hold on to. I loved my brothers with the whole heart of a child who didn't know how to love halfway. But things got harder. Mommy's storms came more often, louder, sharper. Her hands felt like wood, her voice like thunder that cracked open the air. Sometimes she pinched, sometimes she hit, and all of us boys cried. Grandma from California came sometimes. She held me close, kissed my cheeks, told me I was her favorite little man. She didn't say much to my brothers. I didn't understand why. But I loved her warmth because it felt like North Carolina Grandma and Paw, the family I had lost. My oldest brother noticed. He was jealous, he was angry, he was hurting too. And sometimes hurt children try to hurt someone smaller because they don't know what else to do. He touched me in ways that made me feel scared and confused and wrong, inside the kind of wrong a little boy should never have to carry. Mommy didn't see it, or she didn't want to. All I knew was that love felt farther away than ever before. And sometimes, when Mommy held the babies with tenderness she no longer saved for me, when my oldest brother glared at me with eyes full of something sharp I didn't understand, I felt something aching inside, a quiet, lonely ache that wished I could be Mommy's baby again. Just once more. Before the thunder came. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior, protector of the child within, addressing the inner child. Come here, little man. Come sit with me again. I want to talk to you about those days when brothers came and thunder followed. I see you standing in the doorway of a crowded house, trying to understand why love suddenly seemed to have less room for you. I see the way your small shoulders tightened when Mommy's arms held someone new. How you tried to be brave, tried to be helpful, tried to smile through the ache you were too young to name. You didn't understand why her voice softened for the babies and sharpened for you. You didn't understand why her hands turned rough, or why the storms in her chest seemed to know your name. I see how you tried to shrink yourself so you wouldn't be noticed when the thunder rolled. You were too small to understand that her storms were never your fault. You were too small to know that love isn't supposed to change just because the family gets bigger. You were too small to see the serpent rising in the garden, the two-headed one that played favorites, that divided love, that turned children into witnesses of someone else's unhealed pain. You were too small to understand jealousy, too innocent to grasp that hurt children sometimes hurt others because someone hurt them first. What happened to you? Little man, those confused touches, those quiet moments of fear, none of it was your doing. None of it was your shame. None of it was a burden you were meant to carry. You were only trying to belong. You were only trying to be loved. And I see how your heart broke each time Mommy smiled at the babies in the way she used to smile at you. I see how you longed for one day, just one day, to be her little boy again without the storm behind her eyes. I see you. I hear you. And I am here now in a way no one was then. Let me tell you something you should have been told long ago. You were not forgotten. You were not invisible. You were not less worthy because new children arrived. You were not the cause of Mommy's anger or the thunder in her voice. You were not the reason the storms came. You were the boy trying to stay warm in a house where the weather changed too fast and too often. And you survived it. You grew beyond it. You carried love in your pockets even when none was handed to you. Come here, little man. Let me hold you the way you needed to be held back then. You are safe now. You are protected now. And you will never face those storms alone again. You were the firstborn in the garden. You were the boy who felt the first thunder. But you were also the man who walked through the storm and found the light on the other side. I'm here now. I'm not leaving. You will never be alone again. I am the Serpent Slayer. When Love Learned to Hurt, Chapter 4. Inner child voice, the hurt child, bracing, learning fear, beginning shame. I don't remember the first time Mommy's hand hit me. Not the exact moment, not the reason she gave, not the words she shouted. But I remember the feeling. It arrived before the sting, before the tears, before the shock. It came like a cold wind, blowing straight through the center of my chest, whispering a truth I wasn't old enough to name. Something is wrong. Before that moment, I thought Mommy's hands were made only for holding me, washing my hair, buttoning my jacket, fixing my collar, and tucking blankets under my chin just the way I liked. But one day, a day that didn't look different until it suddenly was, her hand came down fast, hard, and sharp. Not like love, not like Mommy, not like what hands are supposed to do. I froze. The air froze. Time froze. I remember thinking maybe she didn't mean it, maybe she slipped, maybe she wasn't looking. But she was. Her eyes were a storm I didn't understand yet, a storm that had nothing to do with me, but somehow found me anyway. After that day, her hands changed. They weren't always soft anymore. Sometimes they arrived suddenly. Sometimes they were loud. Sometimes they were quick as lightning, cracking open a quiet moment before I even knew the sky had darkened. I learned the weather of our house by the sound of her footsteps, by the rhythm of her breathing, by the way her silence moved down the hallway like something alive. Sometimes I felt a presence slithering beneath the floorboards, a dark, cold feeling, a shadow that rose without warning. Mommy wasn't Mommy anymore. This was the first time fear planted itself in my bones, and I never knew if Mommy was walking toward me or if the dark serpent was. I learned to brace myself without knowing why. I learned to hide my toys when she was angry. I learned to make myself small when her voice grew big. Sometimes I crawled into corners and tried to disappear. I ran away to the cemetery to hide that was in our backyard in Burbank. Sometimes I held my breath, hoping she'd forget I existed. Sometimes I looked at my baby brother so new, so gentle, so loved, and wondered why Mommy's hands still felt soft on him but turned hard on me. I thought maybe I deserved it. Maybe I was bad, or too loud, or too much. Because nobody explained that grown-up storms don't come from children. Sometimes Mommy would cry afterward. Those were the moments when I saw the Mommy I loved, the one I wanted so badly to believe in. She would sob for what she had done, and I wanted to tell her, "It's okay, Mommy. I forgive you. I know it's not you." But then, just as quickly, the serpent slipped back through her voice. "You made me do this. Why do you make Mommy act this way? You know I love you, but you're the one who's bad." Sometimes she hugged me too tight and whispered she was sorry into my hair. And those moments confused me most of all, because her arms felt safe again, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe the storm was over, that the sun was back, that Mommy was Mommy again. But storms don't disappear. They hide. They wait. They build. And the little boy in me learned to watch the sky always for the next lightning strike. I didn't have the words for it then, but I felt the truth deep in the ache. Love shouldn't hurt, but mine did, and I didn't know how to make it stop. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior, protector of the child within, addressing the inner child. Come here, little man. Sit close to me now. I want you to hear this with the whole truth of my voice. I see you. I see the boy who learned too early that love could change its shape. I see the child who flinched not because he was wrong, but because someone else was unraveling. I know how you felt when Mommy's hands stopped being gentle, when her voice turned sharp, when her storm broke over your small shoulders again and again. You were too young to understand that storms belong to the sky, never to a child. You were too small to see the battle inside her, too little to recognize that the monster you felt coming down the hallway wasn't your fault and wasn't your doing. But I see it now. I see the serpent that moved through that house, the one that slithered beneath the floorboards, the one that twisted her words until they pierced your innocence like venom. I see where love got tangled with fear, where comfort got braided with pain, where the mother you longed for and the darkness that possessed her took turns holding you. You didn't know how to tell the difference. You weren't meant to. You were a child, a tender, open-hearted boy who only wanted to be loved and held and safe. And instead, you became the one who braced for lightning, the one who listened for footsteps, the one who tried to be smaller and quieter so the storm might pass over you. Little man, you were never meant to carry that fear. You were never meant to learn that love could hurt. You didn't deserve the slap, or the grab, or the pinch, or the words that cut deeper than bruises. You didn't deserve to be told that you made her do it. You didn't deserve the confusion of being hurt and then held by the same hands. That was not love. That was a wound, a generational wound, a serpent's bite passed down through broken stories and unhealed hearts long before you took your first breath. But hear me now. You were never the cause of the storm. You were the child caught in it, and you survived. I see your courage. I see the way you held on to hope even when love turned into something frightening. I see the way you protected yourself with silence and smallness and watching the sky. You did everything a little boy could do to stay alive in a house where lightning lived. And I'm here now, grown, aware, awake, to hold what you had to hold alone. I'm here to tell you the truth. You were good. You were innocent. You were worthy of gentleness. You were worthy of softness. You were worthy of love that never struck you. You were not the reason her hands changed. You were not the reason the serpent rose. You were not the reason love learned to hurt. I am with you now. Your voice is heard. Your pain is honored. Your innocence is restored in the place where truth lives. You never deserved the storm, and you will never face another one alone. I promise you that. The Weapon of Words, Chapter 5. Inner Child Voice, the Silenced Child. Shame taught through language. Identity wounded. I didn't know words could hurt more than hands. Not until I got old enough to understand them, 5, maybe 6, kindergarten age. The age when sounds turn into meaning, and meaning turns into truth. That's when the world shifted again. We moved from Burbank to Simi, into the house on Arcane Street, right across from the neighbors who smiled wide and spoke softly and seemed to live in Sunday clothes. They were Jehovah's Witnesses, a name that meant nothing to me then and everything to Mommy. Mommy and my new daddy joined them as if they had been waiting for a book to justify their storms. Suddenly our life was filled with Bible studies, meetings, talks, Kingdom Hall, field service. And just like that, the two-headed serpent inside Mommy found a sanctuary. One head shone with pride whenever someone praised her for having such well-behaved boys. The other head slithered behind her eyes, watching us, waiting for us to slip, waiting for a reason to strike. Inside the Kingdom Hall, we wore our best clothes, sat in perfect rows, smiled on command, and pretended we were a happy family. We raised our hands and answered questions about scriptures too heavy for little boys to carry, scriptures that echoed through our home like threats disguised as guidance. One scripture was repeated the most. Whoever spares the rod hates his son. Mommy repeated it like it was a song she loved. The serpent repeated it like it was a promise. At 5 years old, I didn't know what spare meant. I didn't know what rod meant, but I learned fast. Because inside our house on Arcane Street, that scripture wasn't a lesson, it was permission. A doorway opened for the serpent to show both its faces. The punishments grew sharper. Not only for me, for all of us boys. We were trained, corrected, disciplined, all wrapped in the word love. But words, they hit hardest now, because now I understood them. And Mommy or the other head she carried knew exactly how to use them. Behave, obey, submit. You are a bad boy, and you will die at Armageddon. You embarrassed us. You made us look bad at the hall. You better answer right next time. You better not disappoint, Jehovah. Don't make us punish you again. Meet me in the bathroom in the back. Stop crying. Jehovah is ashamed of you. Those words wrapped around my ribs the way fear wraps around breath, quiet, tight, unseen. I didn't know how to separate Mommy's voice from the serpent's hiss. I didn't know how to separate God from fear, or love from punishment, or truth from the ones who claim to speak for him. Every night, we studied scriptures. Every week, we practiced our lines for our Kingdom Hall talks. We rehearsed watchtower answers like tiny soldiers under inspection, and still the storms grew louder. I learned quickly that our public behavior determined our private suffering. If I stumbled over a verse, the serpent struck. If I froze during a practice talk, the serpent struck. If I didn't raise my hand on Sunday, The serpent struck. If I fell asleep during the meeting, sharp pinches found the soft spots under the arm. Behind the leg, pinches timed perfectly with the serpent's whisper, "You're embarrassing me." By then, I understood enough words to realize a devastating truth. I could do everything right and still be wrong, still be punished, still be the problem, still be the boy who made mommy angry and daddy quiet and Jehovah ashamed. Because the serpent always needed someone to blame, and I was the easiest one to reach. That's when I learned a new kind of silence, not the silence of fear. I had already mastered that one. This silence was heavier, denser. It lived behind my ribs like something broken. It was the silence of shame, the silence of believing I wasn't good enough for my parents, for God, for anyone. This was the moment I understood that words had meaning and their meaning cut deeper than any hand. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior, protector of the silenced child, addressing the inner child. Come here, little man. Sit with me, where it's quiet, where no scripture hangs over your head, and no serpent waits in the hallway. I want you to listen to me with the ears that were once forced to be silent, because I see you, and I hear you, and for the first time in your life, your voice matters. I see the boy who learned that words could cut deeper than any hand ever could. I see the child who swallowed his questions, who held his breath in Kingdom Hall chairs, who tried so hard to be good enough for a God he was taught to fear instead of feel. You were too small to understand that real faith never demands perfection through punishment. You were too young to know that the scripture she repeated was not a law, it was a weapon she handed to the serpent within her, the serpent that wore two faces, one of piety and one of control. I see you sitting at that table practicing your lines, trying to memorize words that were far too heavy for your little heart. I see the tension in your shoulders every time you stumbled, the way your stomach knotted when her eyes darkened. I see the boy who believed he disappointed God because that is what the serpent told him. But hear me now, little man. You never disappointed God. You were never a shame to heaven. You were never a stain on the earth. The shame belonged to the adults who used holy words as chains. I see how those words carved themselves into your bones. Behave, submit, you embarrassed us. Jehovah is ashamed of you. You were just a child trying to understand the world, trying to make sense of a love that hit hard and a religion that demanded your silence. But the serpent's voice was never divine. It was never righteous. It was never truth. It was manipulation. It was control. It was the brokenness of someone who refused to face her own darkness and instead passed it down to you. And you, little man, you carried the weight of her wounds as if they belonged to you, but they didn't. They never did. So let me lift this from you now. You were good. You were kind. You were eager to learn. You were a little boy who wanted to please the adults around him, because that's what children do when they think love must be earned. But love, true love, is not earned through fear, not through submission, not through silence. You deserved tenderness. You deserved patience. You deserved a mother who protected your heart, not one who pierced it and justified it with scripture. Look at me, little man. Your voice is not small anymore. Your voice is not trapped in shame. Your voice is not silent. Not today, not ever again. I am here, your soul warrior, your protector, your witness, and I will speak the truth you were never allowed to say. You were never broken. You were silenced. And now you are free. You will never face the serpent's words alone again. You will never stand in the shadow of false love again. You will never believe you are unworthy again. Your voice rises now, stronger than every scripture used against you, louder than every command that tried to shrink you, truer than every lie meant to silence you. I see you, I hear you, and I will keep you safe forever. When the house became a trap, Chapter 6. Inner Child Voice. The hypervigilant child, learning danger in the shape of everyday moments. By the time we moved to a Hart Street first grade, second grade, the serpent inside mommy no longer needed excuses to rise. It hissed awake on its own. At Parkview Elementary, kids ran free after school. They raced on the blacktop, chased each other in fields, went home to cartoons, snacks, warm houses, ordinary laughter. I didn't go home to any of that. When I walked through our front door, it didn't feel like stepping into a home. It felt like stepping into the serpent's den. Backpacks dropped, shoes off, no talking, no resting, no being a child. Just serve. Vacuum this, scrub that, pick up, fold, wipe, dust, organize, obey. Every command came from Mommy's mouth, but the serpent controlled the tone sharp, cold, unpredictable. We didn't live inside a house. We lived inside the serpent's mood, a creature that could coil or strike without warning. But the nights were where the serpent did its real damage. We'd be asleep, my brother on the bottom bunk, me on the top, drifting in the only peace we were allowed. Then snap, the light blasted on, white, blinding, violent like the serpent flashing its fangs. Mommy stood in the doorway, laundry clutched in her arms, but the softness of a mother was nowhere in sight. Her jaw locked hard, her eyes sharp and glassy the way the serpent looks before it lunges. She opened our drawers, and that was enough. The serpent woke completely. What is this? You messed up all your drawers. You don't care. You don't listen. You don't love Mommy at all. The serpent spit every word through her voice. Clothes flew like torn feathers. Drawer after drawer ripped out, slammed to the floor, a storm of fabric and fury. And then the belt came off. That sound, the hiss of leather leaving its buckle, was the serpent's tongue flicking, tasting fear. I scrambled down the ladder and slid under the bed, heart pounding, breath stuck in my throat, praying the serpent would lose sight of me. But it never did. The serpent's hand, clamped around my ankle and yanked me out across the carpet. The belt struck. Then again. Then again. Every impact felt like the serpent's tail cracking open, my skin burning through trust, through safety, through childhood. You made me do this. You don't appreciate anything. You little. The words blurred, but the venom stayed. We stood barefoot on piles of clothes that used to be ours now, offerings at the serpent's feet. Then came the sentence that turned the night into captivity. You're not going to bed until every single thing is folded right. So we folded, and folded, and folded. Second graders at midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., folding shirts through tears that slipped down unchecked. Sometimes my body collapsed from exhaustion. I'd crawl under the bed and pretend to reach for a sock, 2 seconds of stolen rest. But the serpent always found me. Always. Pulled me out, struck again, its rage feeding on our fear. There's no going to bed until this house is perfect. 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 The serpent's mantra. This wasn't about shirts, or drawers, or chores. It was about domination, control, feeding the two-headed creature that lived inside, Mommy one head pretending love, the other demanding sacrifice. We weren't sons. We weren't children. We weren't messy, curious boys learning about the world. We were labor. We were targets. We were the serpent's chosen prey. That year, I learned that danger didn't always hide in the shadows or lurk in strangers. Sometimes danger wore your mother's skin. Sometimes danger flipped on the lights at 11 p.m. Sometimes danger coiled under your bed and dragged you out by the leg for the crime of a crooked shirt. And sometimes the most terrifying place in the entire world was your own home on a heart street. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior, protector of the hypervigilant child, addressing the child who lived in the serpent's den. Come here, little man. Step out of the shadows now. You don't have to listen for footsteps anymore. You don't have to brace when lights flick on. You don't have to hide beneath beds or behind drawers or behind silence. I'm here now, and I see the truth of what hunted you. It wasn't just Mommy. It was the serpent that lived inside her. I see how you learned to read danger in the twitch of her jaw, in the tightening of her breath, in the way her eyes sharpened like something cold and ancient was waking behind them. You were only a little boy half asleep, heart soft, mind trusting, but the serpent treated you like an enemy instead of a son. And you, little man, you did everything you could to survive a creature you could never name. I see you. And I speak this truth for you now, so you never carry its burden again. You were not living with an unpredictable mother. You were living with a woman possessed by her own unhealed wounds, wounds that took the shape of a two-headed serpent. One head wore her face, the face you wanted to love. The other struck out of nowhere, feeding on fear, demanding control, craving obedience. You didn't understand that. You weren't meant to. No child is meant to battle a serpent. You didn't deserve the explosion of drawers, the storm of clothes, the belt that hissed like leathered fangs. You didn't deserve to be dragged across the carpet by your ankle, a tiny body against the fury of something much larger than you. You didn't deserve midnight punishments for socks or shirts or folded lines. You didn't deserve a childhood measured in chores, bruises, and the sound of fear building in your own breath. And hear me now. With the strength of a grown man and the heart of the warrior you became. You were not weak. You were not disobedient. You were not the cause of her rage. You were not the serpent's chosen target because of anything you did. You were hunted because the serpent needed victims, and you were the smallest, the softest, the easiest to reach. But you survived it. You learned to sense shifts in the air before storms arrived. You learned to read danger in the smallest sounds. You learned the map of survival in a house where childhood was not allowed. And I want you to hear this now, little man, a promise from who I am today. I see you. I honor your courage. I reclaim your innocence. And I take the serpent's shadow out of your hands forever. You are no longer trapped in that house on Ahart Street. You are no longer the boy folding shirts at 2 a.m. while fear coils in the doorway. You are free, and I, the soul warrior you grew into, stand between you and every shadow that ever tried to claim you. The serpent does not get you again. Not now, not ever. You survived its fangs. You survived its lies. You survived its storms. And now you rise above it. Your story continues, and this time you are not alone. The arrival of Pumpkin and the birth of the boys. Chapter 7. Inner child voice. The displaced child. Losing identity. Losing position. Losing mother. I remember when Pumpkin was born. Not the hospital. Not the smiling relatives. Not the new baby smell. I remember the shift. The way the whole house leaned toward her as if gravity had changed sides. Before Pumpkin, I was Mommy's firstborn, the child she dressed in sailor suits, the baby she bragged about, the one she would lift into the air as if I were her whole world. But the day Pumpkin came home, Mommy birthed something else. A new name, a new category, a new identity for me, the boys. You boys keep quiet. You boys clean this up. You boys always ruin things. You boys are too rough. You boys. The boys wasn't a nickname. It was a cast, a demotion, a disappearing act. Because Pumpkin was not just a baby. Pumpkin was Mommy's new reflection, the little girl she had been waiting for, the daughter she could mold, polish, and live through. And Mommy had a song for her, a real song. Every time she held Pumpkin, she sang an old country tune. Hello, country bumpkin. How's the frost out on the pumpkin? Her voice softened, her eyes warmed, her smile unfurled like a sunrise. A song for Pumpkin. A celebration. A coronation. There was no song for us. No soft voice. No warmth. Just commands. Just chores. Just corrections. Just belts and hangers and rage wrapped in scripture. Pumpkin became royalty. Her room was painted with tiny animals dancing on the walls, pinks, greens, soft colors. A crib that looked like something from a magazine. New curtains, new blankets, new clothes. Everything new. Everything soft. Everything chosen with care. Our room, plain walls. Old furniture. No decorations. No softness. Because the boys weren't worth decorating. Pumpkin cried, Mommy rushed. The boys cried, Mommy reached for the belt. Pumpkin spilled something. Mommy laughed. The boys spilled something. Get the belt. Pumpkin was adored. The boys were tolerated. Barely. The serpent inside Mommy showed both its heads now. One head glowed whenever Pumpkin giggled. The other coiled and hissed whenever the boys entered a room. And in that divide, my anger had nowhere safe to go. So one day, I found it a target. Pumpkin had her own collection of Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls, soft, red-haired toys stacked like tiny worshippers around her crib. Mommy bought them for her constantly, displayed them, dusted them, admired them. They were symbols of Pumpkin's golden place in the Serpent's kingdom. One afternoon, when the house was quiet and the Serpent slept, I took one of the dolls, Raggedy Ann, and carried her outside. I stole a pocket knife from my older brother's drawer. My hands shook with a kind of hurt I didn't know how to name, and I cut the doll's head off. I didn't hate Pumpkin. Not really. I hated my disappearance. But when Mommy found out, the Serpent rose. She beat me. Hard. Over and over. Yelling things I can still feel in the deepest part of my chest. You jealous little brat. What's wrong with you? You're just mad because she's better than you. You boys ruin everything. She screamed until her face twisted, until her voice cracked. And when I cried that I didn't like Pumpkin, that I didn't want to be around her, that I wanted my mommy back, the punishment changed shape. She grabbed a bar of soap, shoved it into my mouth, made me bite down. Bite it, she said. Bite it and don't spit. The foam filled my mouth. It burned my tongue. It coated my throat. Blisters formed and tears streamed, but I wasn't allowed to wash it out. This is what happens when you speak against your sister. The golden child had to be protected, and the boys had to be controlled. Pumpkin never felt the belt, never tasted soap, never slept in fear, never held her breath listening for footsteps in the hallway. She lived under the Serpent's bright head, the one that smiled, the one that sang to her, the one that worshipped her. We lived under the darker one, the head that struck, the one that punished, the one that fed on fear. Pumpkin's birth wasn't just the arrival of a baby. It was the moment my place in the world vanished, the moment Mommy chose her golden child, the moment I became a shadow, one of the boys, one of the forgotten, one of the ones the Serpent struck when it hungered. Pumpkin got a song, we got silence and pain, and the Serpent never let us forget it. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior, protector of the displaced child, addressing the inner child with the two-headed serpent woven throughout. Come here, little man. Come sit with me in the light, far away from the house where the Serpent ruled. I see you. I see the boy who was once a firstborn, a child held with pride, a child Mommy once looked at as if the sun shone only for him. And I see the moment when all of that collapsed. I see the Serpent rise. Not just one head, two. The bright head, smiling for Pumpkin, singing to her, cooing from a throne built out of baby dresses and Raggedy Ann dolls. And the darker head, twisted and venomous, turning toward you with a hunger sharpened by your innocence. Little man, you never stood a chance against a creature like that. I see you on the day Pumpkin came home, the way Mommy's eyes glowed like she had finally met the reflection she'd been waiting for. I see you watching her cradle Pumpkin with gentleness that vanished the moment she turned toward you. That wasn't your fault. That was the Serpent choosing its golden child. I see how your name disappeared, how my baby became the boy's, spoken like an accusation, a dismissal, a curse. I see the shift inside you, the way your small heart twisted, trying to understand why the love that once held you now recoiled as if you were something dirty. I see the jealousy you were too young to name, the ache you weren't allowed to express, the confusion of losing a place you didn't know could be taken. And I see the moment you tried to make sense of it, when you took that Raggedy Ann doll and cut its head off because no one gave you the permission to speak the truth of your pain. Little man, that wasn't cruelty. That was grief. That was a child trying to reclaim even 1 inch of space in a world where the Serpent had taken everything. And I see the punishment that followed, the beating, the screaming, the venom spat from the Serpent's darkest mouth. I see the soap in your mouth, the burning, the foaming, the way you stood there shaking while the Serpent insisted you were wrong for wanting your mother back. Listen to me. Now, listen with the whole of your heart. You were never wrong for wanting to be loved. You were never wrong for wanting your mother to hold you the way she held Pumpkin. You were never wrong for feeling displaced, forgotten, pushed aside. That wasn't something wrong with you. That was something broken inside her. The Serpent lived in her, long before you were born. It chose you as its target because you were tender, because you were sensitive, because you were the easiest one to carry the blame for her emptiness. And Pumpkin, she wasn't your enemy. She was a shield Mommy hid behind, a throne she built to justify her cruelty toward you. I am here now as the man you became, as the soul warrior who rose from your ashes to tell you what no one told you then. You were a good boy. You were worthy of love. You were worthy of gentleness. You were worthy of being seen. You were not one of the boys. You were a child fighting to survive the Serpent's kingdom. You will never again be swallowed by that name. You will never again be erased. You will never again be punished for longing to be loved. I see you now. I hold you now. I protect you now. And hear this, little man, from the deepest truth inside me. The serpent does not rule you anymore. The serpent does not own your story, and it will never touch you again. The Rescue from the Serpent's House, Chapter 8, Inner Child Voice, the Stolen Child. When salvation comes disguised as kidnapping. Mrs. Enos's house wasn't a home. It was a cage, a proving ground, a place where the two-headed serpent inside Mommy felt free to strike whenever it hungered. By then, the beatings had become their own language, a language carved into my skin more deeply than any lesson in school. Mommy didn't just hit us, she broke us. Her words were the serpent's venom. You're as useless as a tit on a bull. I should have aborted you. You boys ruined my life. I hate you. Each sentence landed like a blow, burning into me with a cruelty no child should ever hear. And she made sure the punishments multiplied. Mommy beat us. Then Dad spanked us. Then Mommy beat us again because, as she always said, he never does it right. One punishment, two punishments, three punishments. By the fourth fear itself, we were already half ghost. Mommy slapped me so often that if she raised her hand too quickly, my body ducked on instinct, like a hunted animal. She bragged about it to her friends. Watch this, he flinches like a scared cat, she'd say, laughing. To her, my terror was entertainment. To me, it was shame carved into bone. Then came the punishments. After the punishments, no dinner, no TV, no speaking, no existing. I remember watching TV through the thin crack in the living room door, a sliver of color, a slice of sound, a world I was forbidden to enter. I remember Mommy catching me. What are you doing? Get back in bed. You know you're not allowed out here. Even hope had consequences. And then, out of nowhere, the world cracked open. One morning, a truck rumbled into the driveway. I heard voices warm, familiar, impossible. Uncle David, Aunt Sharon, Uncle Biff, Uncle Brian, Aunt Terry, Aunt Dee Dee, Aunt Tink. It felt like an army sent from the other side of the world. They brought daylight with them, the kind of light that makes shadows nervous. Even the serpent inside Mommy seemed to recoil, the darker head hissing from behind her eyes. And then Uncle David and Aunt Sharon said the most dangerous, beautiful words I had ever heard. Kids, get in the truck. All of you. Come on, let's go. Something inside me leaped, something bright, something alive, something I didn't have a name for yet. Freedom. We climbed into the back of that truck, me, my brothers, the vinyl seats hot from the sun, the smell of gasoline, the wind rushing over us like a baptism. And Uncle David drove, and drove, and did not look back. This was the late 1970s, kids riding in the back of a pickup from Kentucky to Pennsylvania, the sky open, the road endless, our hearts stunned by the sudden absence of fear. Not one scream, not one slap, not one serpent's hiss, just wind and sky and possibility. When we arrived, they took us to the funny farm. Not a joke, a real place, magical and wild. A pond shimmering under the sun, a barn filled with hay, forts and dusty beams, a forest big enough to swallow sorrow, a creek whispering secrets only children hear. The air smelled different from the air in Mommy's house, no bleach, no rage, no fear. The house itself felt enchanted, drawers filled with candy, no locked rooms, no whispered threats, no serpent, just joy, laughter, safety, belonging. Uncle David helped me take apart an old fishing reel I found in the junkyard, cleaned it, oiled it, restored it the way he was quietly trying to restore me. He gave my brother and me a chest full of comic books, entire universes where heroes won battles we never could. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was allowed to be a boy, not prey, not a servant, not a target, but a child with dirt on his cheeks and adventure in his hands. Years later, Uncle David told me the truth. He and Aunt Sharon had learned how bad things had become: the beatings, the bruises, the terror in our voices during phone calls. They feared Mommy might kill us. So they came, not to visit, to rescue. When they confronted Mommy, the serpent bared its fangs. "You're not taking my kids," she hissed, "over my dead body." And Uncle David, the first real warrior in my life, looked her dead in the eye and said, "To hell with you. I am taking them." And he did. They took us. They kidnapped us. They risked arrest. They risked their future. They risked everything because we were worth saving. Because someone finally believed the children. Because someone finally saw the serpent clearly. That trip to the funny farm wasn't just a vacation. It was a rescue, a deliverance, a miracle edged into memory. And Uncle David, the youngest brother, the joyful one, the talented one, became the first man who ever stood between me and the serpent's fangs. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I first learned what real love looked like. And it didn't look like Mommy. It looked like a man driving a pickup truck full of frightened children across state lines, watching the road for police, watching the mirror for danger, risking everything just to save our lives. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior, protector of the stolen child, speaking to the boy who survived the serpent's house. Come here, little man. Come stand beside me in the light, far from that dim Kentucky hallway, far from the serpent's hiss, far from the hands that hurt you and the house that tried to swallow your spirit whole. I see you now, small and shaking, ducking at every raised hand, every sharp movement, every shift in Mommy's mood, your body trained to survive in a world that hated its own children. You were not weak. You were not scared for nothing. You were responding to danger that came wearing your mother's face. You feared her hands because they taught you to. You ducked because that was the only shield you had. You felt shame because she carved it into you every time she laughed at your fear. And I need you to hear this clearly, loudly, without apology. None of that fear belonged to you. None of that shame was yours. None of her words were true. The two-headed serpent that lived inside Mommy used you as its favorite target, one head cooing sweetness to Pumpkin, the other sinking its fangs into you and your brothers. She broke you, then mocked your brokenness. She hurt you, then told the world you deserved it. She made you flinch, then laughed when you did. That was not a mother. That was a predator wearing a mother's skin. And you, little man, you endured her storms with nothing but innocence to protect you. Then one day, the universe intervened, not in the form of a miracle, but in the form of a man with a pickup truck and courage that burned hotter than her rage. Uncle David, the first warrior who ever stood for you when no one else dared to. You didn't know it then, but what he did was sacred, a rescue mission carried out with bare hands and a furious heart. He saw the serpent clearly. He saw the bruises. He heard the fear in your voice. He knew death was circling the house. And he acted. He risked arrest. He risked his life. He risked being hunted by the serpent and the law because you were worth the risk, even when you didn't believe you were worth anything. He didn't take you because he wanted you. He took you because he loved you. Real love, not the poison version you were raised on. A love that fights, a love that protects, a love that says, "Over my dead body will you harm this child again." Little man, you were saved because you deserved to be saved. You did not imagine the cruelty. You did not exaggerate the danger. Your tears were valid. Your fear was valid. Your trauma was real. And the moment you climbed into the back of that truck, wind in your hair, Kentucky shrinking behind you, the serpent's hiss fading, you were reborn. Not fully, not instantly, but the first spark of your future self ignited in that truck bed between the laughter of your brothers and the steady courage of the man driving. I see that boy now wide-eyed, exhausted, hopeful without knowing why, and I wrap my arms around him. You were stolen by love, not stolen from it. You were taken to be saved, not taken to be punished. You were worth crossing state lines for. You were worth breaking rules for. You were worth fighting for. You were worth everything, and you still are. I stand here now as the soul warrior you grew into, the protector forged from your pain, the man who rose from the ashes of that child's terror, the man who learned to fight back, the man who will never bow to the serpent again. You survived her venom, you survived her rage, you survived her house, and now you never walk alone. Not anymore, not ever. I am here, your warrior, your protector, your future self. And I will guard the child you once were until the last serpent in your memory has no power left to bite. The Golden Ones versus the Forgotten Ones. Chapter 9. Inner Child Voice, the Displaced Child. The serpent crowns its favorites, discards its shadows. By the time I reached 4th and 5th grade, we moved again, this time to Burnell Street, a brand new house. A house my daddy built with his own hands, brick by brick, board by board, out of hope and sweat and the belief that a new house meant a new start. But houses don't change people. They only give the serpent new walls to echo in. The day we moved in, Mommy claimed the upstairs rooms, the warm rooms, the rooms with sunlight, the rooms with carpet that still smelled new. Pumpkin got her own room, painted in soft colors. Baby brother slept in Mommy and Daddy's room, cradled in comfort and warmth. And the boys were sent downstairs to the dark, to the basement, a cold, damp, mildewy basement next to the laundry chute, a square metal mouth that dropped dirty clothes onto the concrete floor like offerings to remind us what we were for. We lived down there like shadows, like forgotten things, like clutter she didn't want to look at but didn't want to throw away. The serpent loved it. Upstairs was its throne, Pumpkin, the golden child, glowing, adored, praised for simply existing. Downstairs was its dungeon, the boys, bruised, exhausted, obedient, too tired to dream and too scared to sleep deeply. Mommy was a cake decorator then. Beautiful cakes, roses, lace, sugar flowers. People praised her talent. They never saw the cost. After midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., we stood at the sink, washing her frosting cake tools in freezing water. The food coloring floated on the surface like oil slicks, pink, blue, green, purple, a rainbow on top of cold water that numbed our hands and stole the feeling from our fingers. I was in 5th grade, a little boy standing on tiptoes in the early hours of the morning, holding scrub pads instead of pencils, learning obedience instead of multiplication. Most mornings, I didn't go to school. We were too tired, or too bruised, or Mommy didn't want questions asked. The serpent didn't care if we learned anything except how to serve. Pumpkin never washed dishes. Pumpkin never stayed up late. Pumpkin never got cold hands or tired eyes or bruises she had to hide. The serpent carried her in its bright head, the shining one, the one that smiled and cooed and adored. We lived beneath the other head, the one with the fangs. The fort. One afternoon, we boys built a fort in the yard, a little refuge made of blankets, wood scraps. Imagination, it was the first thing that felt like ours. Pumpkin came to the entrance, curious, smiling. She wanted in. We told her no, not mean, just simple kid logic. Only boys in the fort. Those words traveled through the air like a spark entering a tunnel filled with gas. Mommy heard, the serpent heard. And the serpent came bursting from the house in a fury so loud the birds scattered. Who said that? Who said no girls allowed? All eyes shifted to me. All fingers pointed to me, and I didn't deny it. It was my idea, I said. Childhood courage, childhood fairness, childhood honesty. The serpent does not reward such things. Mommy grabbed me by the arm and dragged me inside, away from the fort, away from sunlight, away from the small world where I had felt free for 5 whole minutes. She pulled me into her bedroom, the serpent's den, dark, hot, filled with whispering adults. Her friends were there, watching, waiting, eager for the spectacle. "Take off your clothes," she said. I froze. I was a child. I didn't know humiliation yet, not until that moment. I undressed with trembling hands. She made me lie on the bed, her bed flat, exposed, defenseless. The serpent coiled around her shoulders as she picked up the wooden spoon, the heavy one, the hard one, the one she saved for real punishment. The first strike burned, the second tore through me, the third blurred the room. She struck again and again and again until I felt my skin break, until the wooden spoon was stained with the dark truth of what punishment meant in the serpent's kingdom. Her friends laughed. They laugh, as if hurting a little boy was entertainment, as if my suffering was comedy, as if my fear was a punchline. Their laughter fed the serpent, made it drunk with power, made Mommy's arms swing harder, faster, with the confidence of a queen delivering justice. "You will never talk back about Pumpkin again. You will never disrespect her. You boys are nothing compared to her." When she finally stopped, I lay there shaking, bleeding, burning, a little boy stripped of dignity and turned into a warning, a sign to the others. Pumpkin was the golden one, and I was the sacrifice. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior, protector of the forgotten child. Come here, little man. Come up from that cold basement in your memory. Come away from the mildew air, the laundry chute, the chores, the late night sinks full of cold water. Sit with me now, in the warmth of the life you built, not the life the serpent forced upon you. I see you. I see everything you carried in the dark. I see the boy whose room was below the floorboards, while the golden one slept above him in painted rooms and soft blankets. I see the child who folded his childhood into chores, into obedience, into silence because the serpent demanded it and because you had no shield then. I see the boy who built a fort to feel free for 5 minutes, only to be dragged inside and stripped of that freedom strike by strike under the gaze of laughing adults. And hear me now as your protector, as the man who survived to speak. You were never wrong for telling the truth. You were punished because the serpent could not stand the truth. I see how the serpent wrapped both heads around your life. The bright head crowned Pumpkin with songs and rooms and praise. The dark head descended upon you with belts and spoons and commands whispered through clenched teeth. You were not forgotten because you lacked worth. You were forgotten because the serpent fed its hunger by dividing and devouring. But you survived the serpent's den. You survived the basement nights, the cold water, the humiliation, the beatings, the soap, the chores, the cruelty disguised as discipline, the favoritism disguised as love. You survived being turned into a boy when you were still a child longing to be seen. And now I speak to that child not with rage but with truth. You deserved a room with color. You deserved blankets that were warm. You deserved mornings filled with school, not nights spent scrubbing frosting in cold sinks. You deserved to play. You deserved to rest. You deserved to be held, not harmed. The serpent lied to you. Every reaction, every punishment, every silence, none of it was about who you were. It was about who she was. The two-headed serpent that fed on control, on hierarchy, on contrast, shining one child like a trophy while burying another like a burden. But hear me now, little man. I will never let anyone bury you again. I will never let your story be swallowed. I will never let your voice be silenced. You are not a forgotten one. You are not a shadow. You are not one of the boys, a category created to erase you. You are Sean, a firstborn, a survivor, a soul forged in darkness who rose anyway. The serpent may have shaped your childhood, but you, little man, you shaped your destiny. And I, your soul warrior, stand with you now to protect what remains, to honor what was stolen, and to make sure that no child within you will ever be cast into the basement again. You are seen, you are honored, you are free. Second father taken away. Chapter 10. Inner Child Voice. The child who keeps losing, parental alienation, displacement, and the serpent's mastery of lies. By 1980, loss wasn't new to me. But the kind of loss that comes wrapped in a serpent's whisper, the kind whispered into a child's ear by the person he trusts most, that kind of loss stains deeper. It doesn't fade. It doesn't heal. It imprints itself into the spine. I was 14, old enough to feel heartbreak, too young to recognize manipulation, too trusting to see the glint of fangs behind the smile. Kentucky had been the last scrap of stability I had, left a house, a rhythm, a father who stood steady in the doorway. He chose me, adopted me, held the line when everything else was chaos. He wasn't perfect, but he was patient. He was consistent. And the serpent inside Mommy could not stand anything she didn't fully own, manage, or control. So her final ultimatum came with venom on one tongue and cold calculation on the other. I'm moving to California. Either come with me or I'm going without you, and I'm taking some of the kids. That was how the serpent spoke, with command disguised as choice, with poison hidden behind the softness of a mother's voice. Children were told we could decide, but children living with a serpent never truly choose anything. Some stayed, some were taken. I was one of the ones loaded into the old country squire station wagon, the wood-paneled hearse that carried away another piece of my life. California wasn't a beginning. It was a new stage built for the serpent, a place for her to shed her skin, recreate her story, and paint herself as the victim in a tragedy she authored. Dad promised he would come later, promised he would follow, promised we wouldn't be separated long. But months passed. Then came the call. He wasn't coming. He had found someone new. The divorce was official. The serpent smiled, not the smile of a mother gaining freedom, but the triumphant smile of a creature who had tightened her coils and won. And then she struck again. Lawsuits, child support filings, threats of arrest, restrictions, manipulated paperwork, weaponized custody. She knew the legal system better than she knew love. She used its language like a second tongue. Mommy told us, he doesn't love you. He abandoned you. He chose another woman. He should be in jail. He was never your real father. And the first time it happened, I believed her. Because children believe serpents long before they understand truth. It wasn't until decades later, after I myself became a father, after my own sons were taken from me by lies, by courts, by manipulation, by money, by false allegations, that I finally saw what had really happened. The serpent didn't lose my father. She stole him. But back then, I was still just the child who kept losing. Then one summer afternoon, a miracle slipped into Uncle David's backyard. My father, the man who raised me, stood there like a ghost who had finally found his way home. Eyes red, voice shaking, arms trembling with longing. He had snuck into California because the serpent threatened jail if he ever tried to see us. A father shouldn't have to be a fugitive to love his children. He hugged me like someone starving. He cried like a man who had been kept away by bars made of laws and lies. And when he slipped away again, quietly, carefully, fearfully, to avoid the serpent's wrath, something inside me cracked too. I missed him so deeply my chest hurt just thinking his name. But the serpent wasn't finished. Years later, after she divorced my adopted father, the man who raised me from infancy to 14, she slithered toward me again, voice dripping with false truth. Your real father was actually a good man. You should look him up. And then she poisoned the man who raised me, the man who chose me, the man who always treated me with gentleness. But this time, I saw the serpent's shadow before her words even reached my ears. I knew who my father truly was. I remembered his patience, his fairness, his tenderness, his love, and I recognized a pattern. Whenever I loved someone, she severed the bond. Whenever I trusted someone, she poisoned the relationship. Whenever I called any man father, she tore him out of my life, not by accident, not by misunderstandings, not by tragedy, but by design. It was never about love, never about truth, never about what was best for her children. It was about control, image, power, vanity. She cared more about her hair, her weight, her clothes, her image, than she ever cared about our hearts. And as I grew older, I learned the deepest truth of all. No matter who the father was, my first dad, my adopted dad, my stepdad, I became terrified to accept any of them. Because every time I opened my heart, the serpent inside mommy found a way to rip that love away. I wasn't just a child who kept losing fathers. I became a child who expected loss, expected abandonment, expected heartbreak, expected the rug to be pulled from under me. It wasn't fathers who left. It was the serpent who made sure I never got to keep them. This was the day my second father was taken from me. Not by chance, not by death, not by his choice, but by the serpent who needed control more than she ever needed her children to feel loved. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior. Protector of the fatherless child. Addressing the inner child. Come here, little man. Sit with me for a moment. Let your shoulders drop. You've carried too much for too long. I want you to hear something no one ever told you. None of this was your fault. Not the leaving, not the losing, not the silence, not the distance, not the grief, not the confusion, not the empty spaces where fathers should have been. You didn't drive them away. You didn't make them disappear. You didn't fail them. You were a child standing in the crossfire of a war you never agreed to fight. Let me tell you something else you need to hear this. You were loved. You were wanted. You were never abandoned. You were taken. A serpent twisted the truth, twisted the law, twisted stories, twisted your memories until you couldn't tell which way was up. That serpent used fear like chains and lies like locks. It wrapped itself around the doorway between you and the men who cared for you, your dad, your adopted dad, even the idea of a future father, and it barred your way with poison you were too young to recognize. Listen to me, because I'm the man you grew into, and I know more now than you could back then. Your father didn't leave you. Your father was shut out. The serpent weaponized the courts, the police, the money, the custody system, the narrative, your fear, your innocence. You were not abandoned. You were isolated. You were not forgotten. You were misled. You were not unworthy. You were trapped. And now I'm going to tell you the truth that heals all the lies. Your daddies loved you, both of them. You were never the problem. You were the treasure the serpent couldn't afford to lose control of. And the pain you felt, the ache in your chest, the longing in your ribs, the confusion that made you shut down, none of that belonged to you. It belonged to the situation you were forced into. So let me take that from you now. Let me take the shame, the guilt, the belief that love leaves, the fear of trusting, the expectation of loss, the idea that you weren't enough, the hurt that kept repeating, the belief that fathers disappear. Come here, little man. Look at me. Love didn't abandon you. The serpent cut it off. But you survived. You endured. You grew. You learned the truth the hard way through wounds so deep they shaped your entire life until you finally understood what was done to you. And now, as the soul warrior you've become, I promise you this. I won't let anyone, not a serpent, not a system, not a lie, not a memory, take your worth away ever again. The cycle ends with me. You are protected now. You are seen. You are held. You are no longer fatherless. Because I am here, the man you became, the protector you never had, the truth teller who replaces every lie, the warrior who stands between you and every serpent that ever tried to take something from you. You are not alone anymore. You were never meant to be, and I'll walk with you from this chapter forward for the rest of our life. The Boy with No Classroom to Call Home, Chapter 11, Inner Child Voice, The Drifting Child, Rootlessness, Instability, the Loss of Belonging. By the time I turned 11, I already felt older than the kids around me. Not wiser, just worn. Worn from moving. Worn from learning and unlearning and relearning. Worn from never staying long enough for a school to remember my name. 3 elementary schools, 3 junior highs, and it wasn't even the end yet. Other kids talked about their school like it was a home a place that belonged to them, a place where their friends grew year after year, a place where memories stacked like photographs on a dresser. I didn't have that. I had classrooms that blurred together, hallways I walked through only once, name tags I wore more than friendships, teachers who learned my name only to forget it by the next semester when mommy uprooted us again and dragged us somewhere new. I was always the new kid. Every year, every season, every time the serpent inside mommy shed its skin and needed a new landscape to hunt in. When I was held back in third grade in Kentucky, it wasn't because I couldn't learn. It was because I had never been given the soil to grow in. I was a plant dug up again and again before the roots had time to take hold. The serpent didn't care about gardens, only control. Then came the divorce. Mommy shed my adopted father the way a snake sheds old skin, without emotion, without ceremony, without looking back. He was the man who had chosen me, the man who stepped into my life when my biological father had been cut away. He treated me better than his own flesh and blood. He gave me warmth, structure, stability, and mommy discarded him as if none of that mattered. The serpent always devours the ones who love us most. When she left him, she scattered us like seeds in the wind, each child sent to a different relative, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't be bothered to keep together. We weren't a family. We were luggage stored, relocated, waiting for her to collect herself, waiting for her to choose a new man, waiting for the next house where the serpent could curl up and spread its shadow again. When she finally gathered us back together, she brought us to California, to Glendale, to another house, another life, another beginning that felt more like an ending. I was only 15, but I was already exhausted from starting over. I didn't move to California because I wanted her love. That love had died in me a long time ago. I moved to get away from the predator that stalked me in my father's house, to escape horror by walking back into the serpent's den. That's how trapped I was. In Glendale, I went to Toll Junior High. New school, new halls, new faces, same emptiness. Mommy was stressed out with me. That's how she put it. Too much trouble, too much anger, too much boy. So one day, the serpent decided to take a break. She drove me over to Granddad's place, her father, the man who painted tanks in the army, who carried his own wounds and wars in the bottom of a bottle. His apartment was a single room stitched to a tiny kitchen and a bathroom. No toys, no games, no laughter. Just a chair, a TV, a man and his drink. He was already half gone by the time I got there, eyes heavy, voice slow, whiskey breathing through every word. "You're 15," he said. "You ever drank?" I told him yes. It was a lie. I wanted to sound like a man. I wanted to belong to something. "Well, hell," he said, "let me fix you a drink." He didn't know any other way to bond. This was his language, his love letter made of alcohol. He poured me a drink, and I swallowed it down. Warmth rushed through me, head light, chest loose, fear fading at the edges. For the first time, I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like prey. I just felt gone. When Mommy walked back in, she smelled it immediately. Her face twisted. The serpent's eyes narrowed. "You gave him a drink?" she screamed at Granddad. He shrugged, already half floating in his own escape. "Ah, you gotta let him be a young man," he slurred. "He's a man now. He can drink." The serpent hissed at him, venom in every word, then turned its head toward me. "How could you do this? You're embarrassing me." "Oh, you want a drink now? You think you're a big man?" On the car ride home, she spat poison the whole way. "Oh, you're gonna see now. You think you're grown? We'll see how grown you are." I sat there drunk, floating, not really understanding what was waiting for me. When we got home, she didn't scream. She didn't reach for the belt. She did something worse. She sat me at the kitchen table, pulled out a bottle, and said, "Oh, you're a big man now, huh? You can drink, right? Okay, let's drink." She made me a vodka gimlet, set it in front of me like a test. "Drink it." I drank it. I was too drunk to care, too numb to be afraid, too hollow to realize what she was doing. She smiled that serpent smile. Oh, you're still a big man? You think you're something? You think you're tough? Here, have another. She poured me a second gimlet. I drank that one too. The room started spinning, the floor tilting, her voice stretching into long, slow hisses. You're gonna see now. You're gonna get everything you asked for. I don't remember anything after that. I woke up the next day somewhere between alive and gone. No one had checked on me. No one had made sure I was breathing. I could have died, and the serpent would have told the story so that it was my fault. She did the same thing when she caught me smoking her cigarettes. She found them in my pocket one day when she was doing the laundry. Oh, you're a big man now? You want to smoke? She drove to the store, bought a pack of non-filtered Lucky Strikes, sat me down, lit one, shoved it into my fingers. Smoke it. I did. Another. I smoked that one. Another. I made it through 5 or 6 before I threw up violently, completely, my body rejecting all of it. I was sick the whole day, head pounding, stomach twisted, lungs burning. I went to my room, shaking and miserable, while the serpent told herself she'd taught me a lesson. Those were her lessons. Not guidance, not conversation, not protection. Humiliation, overload, overdose. Teach the boy by breaking the boy. Teach the boy by making him sick. Teach the boy by pushing him past his limit and calling it love. That's the kind of parenting a serpent knows how to do. Lunch in the bathroom. Inner child voice. The vanishing child. Shame, isolation, and finding refuge on the margins. After Glendale came Chino. Another move. Another house my parents were proud of. Another school I didn't ask for. When Mommy and my new daddy moved us into the nice place in Chino, I felt nothing. Just another street, another house, another life I was supposed to adapt to like a stray dog dropped in a new neighborhood. Don Lugo High. A new hallway, new faces, new classes, new teachers who didn't know me and didn't care to. By then, I understood something most kids never have to learn. Mommy never moved for opportunity. She moved for herself. The serpent needed new places to hide, new lives to consume, new people to fool. We were just pieces on her board. Even Pumpkin wasn't golden anymore. The serpent devours everyone, eventually everyone except its queen. School was hell. I hated school as much as I hated Mommy. School was humiliation. School was exposure. School was the place where everyone else had childhoods and I had exhaustion. I didn't know basic math, didn't know basic grammar, didn't know how to sit still through a lesson when my entire nervous system was trained to listen for belts, footsteps, suddenly raised voices, and the click of a light flipped on at 11 p.m. The only things I excelled at were singing, acting, and science. I loved facts. I loved theories. I loved anything that made sense because Mommy never did. Every day when the lunch bell rang, I disappeared. Sometimes into the bathroom, tray balanced on my lap, the echo of toilets flushing and the smell of bleach my only company. Sometimes to the side of a building where no one went, where I could eat without eyes on me. Kids gathered in groups, laughing, shouting, belonging. I watched them the way you watch a world you were never allowed to enter. I was a ghost haunting the edges of other children's lives until I found the smoking section. That's where the outcasts lived, the stoners, the riffraff, the kids who sold weed or stole beer or carved their initials into tables, the kids from broken homes who didn't have energy left to pretend they were okay. They became my people. That's where I met Alan, my first real friend. Someone who saw me not as the new kid, but as another survivor. We smoked Saratogas. I stole from Mommy and new Daddy those long brown cigarettes that lasted 2 breaks and stained my fingers. I didn't smoke because I liked it. I smoked because it meant I belonged somewhere. It made me visible. It made me human. But the serpent does not forgive independence. The more I bonded with the kids on the fringe, the angrier she became. The beatings continued. The insults sharpened. The hiss grew louder. It didn't matter that I wasn't doing hard drugs. It didn't matter that I was just trying not to drown. To Mommy, my friendships were defiance, and defiance was sin. Until one day, I couldn't take it anymore. I was 17, tired, bigger than Mommy, stronger than Mommy, but still emotionally chained to the fear she had carved into me since I was small. She was in one of her rages, the serpent fully awakened. She chased me around the house, swinging a broom, striking wherever she could reach my head, my shoulders, my arms, my back, outside, inside, through the living room, through the hallway, around the kitchen. Smack, smack, smack. Each hit a reminder of every hit before it. I kept running because the child in me still believed running was safer than standing still. Then she started crying. Not real crying, her crying, serpent crying, manipulation crying, and just like always, something in me responded. I stopped. I went to her. I tried to comfort her. "It's okay, Mommy." Her tears dried instantly. She lifted the broom and hit me again as hard as she could. Something snapped inside me. Something old. Something tired. Something done. I grabbed the broom, ripped it out of her hands, broke it across my knee, threw it down, and I said the words I had waited a lifetime to say. "You will never hit me again. Ever. Next time you try, I will hit you back." Her eyes widened. Not with fear, with rage. "Go to my room," she hissed, voice dripping serpent venom. "Sit on the bed and wait for your father to get home." I waited, not afraid anymore, just empty. When he came home, I stood up, and he said the sentence that sealed the truth of my childhood. "I married your mom. I love your mom. I don't love you. If you ever hit your mom again, I will put you down." And he beat me while Mommy watched, nodding, smirking, satisfied. But something had changed. Not in her, she would never change. In me. Because from that day forward, I knew one thing with crystal clarity. I would never take her shit again. Not her broom, not her belt, not her serpent lessons, not her poison tongue. Never again. The child inside me may have been beaten that night, but the man inside me finally woke up. Adult voice reflection. Soul warrior. Protector of the drifting and vanishing child. Addressing the inner child. "Come here, little man. Scoot closer. You don't have to stand alone in the hallway anymore. You don't have to eat your lunch in bathrooms, or hide by brick walls, or pretend you don't care that no one is sitting with you. I see you. I see the boy who never had a school to call mine. The boy whose roots were ripped up so many times he stopped trying to grow them at all. I see you walking into yet another classroom, new town, new state, new hallways, carrying nothing but a backpack, a tired body, and a nervous system permanently on high alert. Other kids had school photos on the fridge, year after year in the same place. You had enrollment forms and withdrawal dates. You weren't failing. You were surviving. Every move, every new start, every new roll call where your name was mispronounced or forgotten, that wasn't you being stupid. That was the serpent dragging you from soil to soil, never giving you a chance to belong. I see you in Chino, too. I see you walking into Don Lugo, another brand new house, another fresh start for Mommy and her latest husband, while you felt nothing but numb. Everyone was so proud of the house. No one was checking on the boy inside it. You knew by then what most grown men never understand. Mommy didn't move to build a better life for her children. Mommy moved to build better stages for herself. The serpent needed fresh places to coil, fresh people to fool. You and your brothers and Pumpkin and every man she married, you were all just pieces on her board. I see you at lunch, holding a tray in hands that shook more from shame than from hunger. Sitting in a bathroom stall, trying not to breathe too deeply because of the bleach and the smell and the echoing flushes. Standing alone on the side of the building, watching groups form, dissolve, reform circles you were never invited into. You weren't weird. You weren't broken. You were lonely. You were exhausted. You were carrying more pain at 13, 14, 15 than most adults ever face. And then I see you finding the smoking section. Not because you loved cigarettes, not because you wanted to be bad, but because that's where the other broken kids stood. The ones with stormy houses, the ones whose parents screamed, the ones who understood what it meant to be unwanted. That's where you met Alan. A friend who saw you not as the new kid, but as someone who understood the war. You weren't being rebellious. You were looking for a tribe. You were building your own small, fragile version of belonging in the only corner of the world that would have you. And the serpent hated that. Because the serpent can't stand when a child finds even a scrap of selfhood outside its control. So the beatings continued. The insults sharpened. The hissing got louder. You're nothing. You'll never be anything. I don't love you. Let's talk about that day with the broom. You were 17. Your body had grown, but inside you was still the boy who had once been dragged from under beds, blamed, beaten, used. The serpent was in full rage, swinging a broom, chasing you through the house, striking your head, your shoulders, your back, like you were still a little boy who had no right to defend himself. You ran because you were trained to run, to duck, to take it, to survive. And then she cried, not the tears of a remorseful mother, the tears of the serpent, weaponized, strategic, manipulative. You did what you had always done. You went back to comfort her. Even then, even after all the years of violence, your first instinct was compassion. And she used it. Again. As soon as you stepped close, she struck you with everything she had left. That was the moment something ancient in you broke free. You grabbed the broom, snapped it over your knee, threw it down, and you did something the serpent never expected. You drew a line. You will never hit me again. Ever. Next time you try, I will hit you back. That wasn't disrespect. That wasn't rebellion. That was self-defense. That was a boy standing in the doorway of manhood saying, no more. Of course, the serpent twisted it. Of course, she lied to the man she married. Of course, she painted herself as the victim and you as the threat. I married your mom. I love your mom. I don't love you. If you ever hit your mom again, I will put you down. Those words, they were a second betrayal, not just from a man you called dad, but from a system that always chose the serpent over the child it devoured. And still, even as he beat you with her watching, something in you stayed awake this time. You finally saw them clearly. A man who chose his allegiance to her over any responsibility to you. A woman who fed off your pain and called it discipline. A serpent queen who would sacrifice any child, any man, any truth to keep her throne. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. You were not the villain in that story. You were the only sane one in the room. Little man, teenage you, I need you to hear this. You were never nothing. You were never unlovable. You were never stupid or lazy or a failure. You were a child trying to grow roots on ground that kept being ripped out from under you. You were a boy carrying abuse in your body, sleep deprivation in your bones, shame in your chest, and still you got up and went to school. Still you tried to find friends. Still you found tiny pockets of belonging in bathrooms and smoking circles. That broom moment, that was not the day you disrespected your mother. That was the day your soul warrior picked up his sword. That was the day you told the serpent, even if no one heard it but you, I am not yours to break anymore. I'm here now, standing beside that boy in the hallway, sitting next to him in the bathroom stall, leaning against the wall with him at lunch, standing in that bedroom when the broom snaps. I put a hand on his shoulder and I tell him, you were right to resist. You were right to be angry. You were right to want out. You were right to protect yourself. You were never the problem. You were the child caught in a nest of snakes, and still, somehow, you never lost the part of you that could love, that could sing, that could act, that could wonder about science and truth and the way things really work. You did not disappear. You drifted, you hid, you survived, and now, as your soul warrior, I bring you home. You have a classroom now, not four walls and a chalkboard, but a life that finally belongs to you. You're not the new kid anymore. You are the author, you are the man, you are the protector. And I promise you, no broom, no belt, no serpent tongue will ever have that power over you again. Sit with me a moment. Let me hold you the way no adult ever did. Let me speak into the wounds you never had words for. I see you, the boy who kept a backpack packed because the serpent never let his roots dry long enough to grow. The boy who learned to scan new classrooms the way soldiers scan new terrain. The boy who entered every school asking silently, "Will I be safe here? Will anyone know me? Will anyone keep me?" You weren't drifting because you were lost. You were drifting because the ground beneath your feet kept being stolen. You never had a classroom to belong to because you never had a home to belong to. And I want you to hear this truth from the man you became the sole warrior who survived. None of that was your fault. Not one move, not one school, not one failure, not one tear in those lonely lunchrooms. You weren't failing. You were coping. You were adapting. You were surviving a life no child should have had to survive. You carried exhaustion no 11-year-old should carry. You carried fear that didn't belong to you. You carried shame that was manufactured by the serpent and forced onto your small shoulders. When you hid in bathroom stalls with your lunch, you weren't hiding because you were weak. You were hiding because you were trying to protect your own spirit. You were trying to find a corner of the world where you could breathe without being judged, mocked, or hit. When you latched on to outcasts, the smokers, the drifters, the fringe kids, you weren't rebelling. You were finding the only tribe that understood broken hearts. When you smoked their cigarettes, you weren't trying to be cool. You were trying to stop disappearing. And when you finally reached the point where the serpent chased you with a broom and your stepfather joined her in the violence, the truth is this: you weren't fighting back. You were waking up. You were saying, in the only language they allowed you to speak, "I am not prey anymore. I will not let you hit me again. I will not be small forever." Listen to me closely now, child. All those years you thought you were weak, you were actually powerful. All those moments you thought you were alone, you were actually being carried by the warrior inside you who refused to let the serpent break you completely. Underneath your anger was grief. Underneath your rebellion was loneliness. Underneath your silence was a heart desperate to be protected, seen, and loved. You weren't a problem child. You were a wounded child. A misplaced child, a drifting child, and you survived. You survived being moved like luggage. You survived bathroom lunches. You survived drunken adults. You survived being poisoned with alcohol and forced to smoke until you vomited. You survived broomsticks, insults, slaps, threats, and abandonment. You survived schools that never knew your name and homes that never knew your worth. And now that I am here, I can finally say the words you should have heard at 11. You deserve stability. You deserve safety. You deserve gentleness. You deserved a mother who protected you, not one who weaponized your childhood for her own vanity. Come here, little man. Let me put my hand on your shoulder so you can feel the truth in your bones. You didn't fail. You adapted. You didn't drift. You were pushed. You didn't disappear. You were never seen. But I see you now, and I'm not letting the serpent near you again. Not in memory, not in belief, not in shame. You belong here with me. You're home now, and the drifting ends today. The Boy Who Quit the World, Chapter 12. Inner Child Voice, the Abandoned Dreamer, the Collapse, the Breaking Point, Homelessness, and the Loss of the Future. By the time I turned 18, I wasn't a young man stepping toward adulthood. I was a child collapsing under the weight of a life he never asked for, a boy carrying the bones of a childhood the serpent inside mommy had cracked and splintered piece by piece. School had never been a sanctuary for me. It was the final battlefield, the place where the serpent came to collect the last fragments of whatever hope I had left. The dean's office, the moment the world went silent. I remember being summoned into the dean's office. Beige walls, dead and hollow, like they'd given up trying to hold color. A fluorescent light overhead flickering like a pulse fighting to stay alive. He sat across from me, with paper spread across the desk, like the evidence in a trial where the outcome had already been decided. He didn't yell. He didn't shame me. He simply delivered the verdict. You're 18. You have a 0 GPA. You can't graduate with your class. Even if you passed everything from this point forward, you would still need summer school just to get your diploma. He said it softly, but the words hit with the force of a sledgehammer. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel embarrassment. I felt confirmation. Confirmation of every move, every school change, every beating, every night I lay awake listening for footsteps, every time Mommy Serpent leaned over my shoulder and hissed, "You're stupid. You're nothing. You'll never amount to anything." I didn't quit school out of rebellion. I quit because the serpent had starved me of something every child needs in order to grow: stability. When I walked out of that office, I felt like a ghost leaving its body. I didn't just quit school. I quit the world. A brief shelter before the storm. Before that meeting, I had been living with my grandmother and my aunt because Mommy claimed she couldn't handle me anymore. But I knew the truth. I had just turned 18. The child support stopped. That's what she couldn't handle. My grandmother was soft-spoken, gentle, the first place in years where the air didn't feel dangerous. Living with her was like slipping into warm water after a lifetime of drowning. But trauma doesn't leave when you find safety. It waits, it festers, it grows teeth in the quiet. I slept too much, or not at all. I drifted through days like smoke drifting through an empty house. I cared about nothing, not school, not the future, not even myself. I wasn't lazy. I was collapsing. And the serpent could smell collapse from miles away. Dragged back to the lair. She came for me. Mommy arrived like a storm wearing makeup, her stance rigid, her eyes cold, her voice split in two, one tone icy, the other filled with venom. "You're coming home. You'll finish school or get a job. You're a grown man now. I'm not supporting your lazy ass." Not one word about my pain. Not one word about the truth. Not one word acknowledging what she had done to me. The serpent never takes responsibility. It coils around blame, crushes it, and spits it back into its child's face. She dragged me back to Burbank, back into the serpent's nest, back under her shadow. A serpent never releases what it believes it owns. Homeless at 18, the quiet death of a dream. The screaming continued. The threats, the humiliation, the venom. One night, after another assault of rage and words designed to break me, something inside me finally cracked. Not rebellion, not courage, survival. I walked out with nothing, no plan, no direction, nothing except the truth pounding in my chest. If I stayed, I would die, in spirit, in mind, maybe in body. I didn't wander far. Traumatized boys never wander far from the people who broke them. I found shelter in my aunt's abandoned garage, a rotting wooden box that smelled of oil, mold, and old summers. No bed, no insulation, no heat, just concrete, darkness, and a thin blanket I found stuffed in a cardboard box. Here's the real truth. I chose a garage over my mother. The serpent had made home unlivable, so I became a ghost living beside the living, working to stay alive. I worked wherever I could: Pup and Taco, Winchell's, Burbank Hospital. Work became my identity because everything else had been taken from me. Behind the steam of the grill, no one saw my shame. Covered in flour, no one saw my heartbreak. Mopping hospital floors at 2 a.m., I could pretend for a moment that I mattered. But every quiet moment, the serpent's whisper slithered back. "See, you're nothing without me." And part of me believed it. Drifting through other people's homes. I lived with my aunt for a while, a woman who loved life, laughter, and freedom. But I was a storm inside. Even she couldn't carry me. Then my brother. One joint, one wrong moment, and I was out. Then a friend with a violent alcoholic father. That house was a war zone. Doors kicked in, screaming, fists, broken furniture, suicide threats, drugs, chaos. I could see the road ahead if I stayed. Death. By overdose. By violence. By despair. Or maybe just by the exhaustion of existing. My skin erupted in psoriasis, my body's way of shouting, "You cannot live like this." The serpent returns, but not for love. When Mommy finally saw me again, she didn't see a son in crisis. She saw a reflection she didn't like. "You look disgusting. You need to get yourself together." Not love, not concern, not care, image. The serpent cared only about image. She dropped me off at Uncle David's like trash too heavy for her to carry. Uncle David, the man who rebuilt me. Uncle David opened the door before I even knocked. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need the story. He saw it in my eyes, my posture, my skin. He gave me work. He gave me structure. He gave me something the serpent never did, a foundation. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise his hand. He raised me. Day by day, job by job, piece by piece, he rebuilt what the serpent had shattered again. Joining the Navy, rebirth. At 19, I enlisted, not for patriotism, not for glory, not for adventure, for distance, for structure, for identity, for survival, for the chance to become someone new, someone other than the boy who quit the world. The serpent had taken my childhood, my home, my education, my stability, 2 fathers, my worth. But the military gave me something the serpent never intended for me to have: a beginning, a name, a purpose, a direction, a future. The boy who quit the world died the day I enlisted. And the man writing these words, he is the one who survived the serpent. Adult voice reflection. The awakening of the soul warrior. The moment when the inner child becomes the man. There comes a moment in every survivor's life when the child inside them stops whispering for rescue and begins to rise. This chapter, this descent into collapse, homelessness, and rebirth is that moment for you. The boy who begged for safety, who hid in bathrooms, who endured the serpent's fangs and venom, who flinched at raised hands and raised voices, that boy has reached the end of his childhood. Not because he healed, not because the world became kind, but because he endured everything the serpent threw and still found the strength to stand. This is where the line is drawn. The wounded boy does not need protection anymore. He becomes the protector. He becomes the one who refuses to run, refuses to back down, refuses to bow, refuses to be defined by the serpent's story. This is the moment he sheds his last skin of childhood and steps into the fire as something new, the soul warrior, the one who no longer hides, the one who no longer apologizes for surviving, the one who no longer seeks comfort because he has become the strength he once needed. The serpent is still there, still hissing, still striking, still twisting the world with lies and rage. But now the serpent is facing someone different. Not the abandoned dreamer, not the frightened child, not the powerless boy. Now it faces the man forged in the dark, the one who walked through homelessness, shame, despair, and chose life anyway. The one who learned to stand without being taught. The one who built himself from the wreckage. The one who became his own father, his own protector, his own beginning. This is the end of the child chapters and the beginning of the soul warrior story. The journey continues. Chapter 13. The inner child's story ends here. The boy who endured the serpent, the boy who survived the lies, the boy who lost fathers, homes, identities, and yet never lost his soul. He walked through fire no child should ever face, and still carried hope like a hidden ember. From this point forward, the boy is no longer the narrator. A new voice steps forward, forged, awakened, reborn. The soul warrior rises. He emerges from the ashes that were meant to bury him. He wears his scars as sacred armor. He becomes the guardian of the inner world no one ever protected for him. A child finally protected, finally safe in the arms of the man he grows into. This is not the end, only the closing of the first book of his life. A chapter honored, a childhood reclaimed, a spirit awakened. The saga continues in the next volume. The Soul Warrior, the Phoenix's rebirth. After a life shaped by a narcissistic mother, ahead waits the battlefield where he rebuilds everything the serpent tried to destroy and claims the life he was always meant to live. Conclusion. To the reader who has journeyed through these pages with me, you have witnessed the breaking of a child. You have heard the hiss of the serpent. You have felt the weight of a love that hurt, a home that hunted, a mother who was possessed by her own unhealed darkness. But you have also witnessed something else. You have witnessed survival, Not the kind that looks pretty in movies, not the kind wrapped in triumph and applause, but the kind that matters most, the kind that keeps breathing when breathing feels impossible, the kind that chooses life in a garage over death in a house, the kind that stands up one more time after being knocked down 1,000 times. This book, this first volume, is the testimony of a child who was supposed to break and didn't. The serpent had every advantage: control, authority, the power of a system that believed her lies, the trust of a child who had no choice but to believe her. She had years, she had proximity, she had the law on her side and the church blessing her cruelty. And still, something inside that boy refused to shatter completely. That something was the soul warrior waiting, watching, building strength in the dark. You are reading this now because that inner child survived long enough for the man to be born. Because the boy who quit the world didn't die, he transformed. But transformation is not the end of the story. It's the beginning. The inner child's voice closes now. His testimony is recorded. His pain is witnessed. His innocence is honored. From this threshold forward, a new narrator emerges, the man forged in the fire. In the pages ahead, in the volumes to come, you will witness what happens when a soul warrior finally awakens to his own power. You will see the battles he fights, not against the serpent that raised him, but against the serpent that still lives inside the systems he enters. You will watch him reclaim what was stolen: his identity, his worth, his right to love and be loved, his capacity to father, to lead, to stand unafraid. You will see him face mirrors of the serpent in relationships, in workplaces, in his own patterns, and finally learn how to slay what once hunted him. This is not a story about victimhood. This is a story about resurrection. This is not a story about blame. This is a story about reclamation. This is not a story about what was done to him. This is a story about what he did with the wreckage and what he became in the building. The inner child rests now, held in the arms of the man he grew into, safe, protected, finally witnessed. And the soul warrior stands at the threshold of his own becoming, ready to claim the life that was always meant for him. The journey continues. The real battle begins. Welcome to Volume 2, The Soul Warrior, where a man walks out of the ashes and discovers that survival was only the beginning. The serpent is still out there, but so is he. And this time, he is not running. This time, he is standing. This time, he is ready. Turn the page. The phoenix rises. To the reader who has carried the inner child this far, you have walked with a boy through the darkest chapters of his life. You have witnessed the serpent's two heads, one whispering confusion and charm, the other striking with shame and punishment. You have seen how a child learns to survive by becoming small, silent, invisible. But survival, as you now know, is only the beginning. In this second volume, The Birth of the Soul Warrior, the narrative shifts. The inner child does not disappear. He is there, always. But now he is joined by something new: awareness. The soul warrior emerges not as a hero rushing in to save the day. He emerges as a witness. He is the one who finally sees the serpent clearly, not as a mother, not as authority, not as truth, but as what it actually is: an internalized voice that was never his own. Through military discipline, through false belonging, through loss and hard-won clarity, this man begins to understand something crucial. The voice that told him he was nothing was installed, not innate. The shame that lives in his bones was programmed, not earned. The numbness he learned as strength was survival, not identity. This second book traces the awakening. It does not promise healing completed. It offers something more valuable: recognition. The moment when an adult survivor finally names the predator that lives inside him, the internalized serpent that whispers, controls, punishes, just as the original one did. The moment when he stops obeying that voice without question. And once that moment comes, everything changes. Because the soul warrior does not fight the serpent outside of him anymore. He fights the serpent within the voice that says he is not worthy, not enough, not deserving of the life he is building. And for the first time, he has a chance to win. This is the story of that battle. not wrapped in inspiration or false hope, but rooted in what survivors actually experience. The slow, painful, necessary process of learning to stand without apology, of learning that your reactions were not weakness, they were adaptation, that your pain was not punishment for something you did, it was evidence of something that was done to you. The Two-Headed Serpent Chronicles continues because the story is not over. The inner child has been heard. The soul warrior has been awakened. Now comes the reckoning, where a man who was trained to be prey finally becomes the protector of his own life. If you survived narcissistic abuse, if you learned to disappear to stay safe, if you carry an inner voice that sounds like the person who hurt you most, this second volume speaks directly to you. Because the Soul Warrior's awakening is not just his story, it is the story of every survivor learning to stop obeying the serpent. It is the story of every wounded child becoming the guardian of their own becoming. It is the story of standing, finally, without permission. The journey that began in darkness continues in the light of recognition. Volume 2. The Two-Headed Serpent, The Birth of the Soul Warrior, is available now, available on Amazon. In the final volume, where the Soul Warrior claims the life he was always meant to live awaits. The phoenix does not just survive, it rises, and you are reading the account of that rising. Welcome to the Two-Headed Serpent Chronicles. The story continues. Epilogue. If you are reading this, you are no longer just a reader. You are a witness. You have stood beside a small boy as he endured what no child should endure. You have walked with him through gardens that turned to battlefields, through homes that became prisons, through silence that screamed louder than any voice. You have heard the serpent's hiss, both heads speaking at once, one whispering lies disguised as love, the other striking with punishment disguised as discipline. You have watched innocence stolen, fathers taken, names erased, worth dismantled piece by piece. And you have witnessed something the serpent never expected. Survival. Not pretty survival. Not triumphant survival. Not the kind that walks away unscathed and whole. But survival nonetheless. The kind that keeps breathing in garages that smell of oil and old summers. The kind that works graveyard shifts just to remember what mattering feels like. The kind that enlists in the military not for glory, but for distance, for structure, for the chance to become someone the serpent didn't create. This book is not the story of healing. It is the story of endurance. It is the record of a child who was supposed to break and didn't. Not because he was strong, but because something inside him, something deeper than fear, deeper than shame, deeper than the serpent's voice, refused to let him disappear completely. That something was the soul warrior, sleeping, waiting, building strength in the dark. And when the boy finally walked out of that dean's office, out of that house, out of that life, when he chose a concrete floor over the serpent's nest, the soul warrior began to stir. He is not fully awake yet. That awakening comes later, in the volumes ahead. But this testimony you hold in your hands is the foundation. This is the truth that had to be told before the transformation could be understood. This is the child's voice, finally heard. His pain, finally witnessed. His innocence, finally honored. And now, as this first volume closes, the boy steps back, not because his story is over, but because his testimony is complete. He has spoken. He has been seen. He has been believed. And from this moment forward, the man he becomes will carry him, protect him, speak for him when the serpent tries to silence him again. Because the serpent is not done. Not yet. It will appear again in different forms, different faces, different systems. It will whisper through relationships, through self-doubt, through old wounds that never fully healed. But the difference is this. The boy is no longer alone. The soul warrior stands beside him, now awake, aware, and ready to fight the battles the child never could. This is not the end of the story. This is the closing of the first chapter, the one written in tears and bruises and silent prayers whispered into darkness. The next chapter begins in fire, in military halls and broken mirrors, in discipline and false belonging, in the slow, painful recognition that the serpent's voice lives inside him now and must be faced, named, and finally cast out. That story waits in Volume 2, The Birth of the Soul Warrior. But before you turn that page, I need you to understand something. If you recognized yourself in these pages, if you saw your own childhood reflected in that boy's eyes, if you felt the serpent's hiss in your own bones, then this book was written for you. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You did not imagine it. You did not deserve it. And the fact that you survived, that you are here, reading this, breathing, standing, is proof that the serpent did not win. You endured, and endurance, my friend, is the first act of war against everything that tried to destroy you. The inner child rests now, protected, witnessed, finally safe in the arms of the one who survived him. And the soul warrior rises to meet what comes next. The journey continues. The battle is far from over. But for the first time in his life, the boy who was once prey has become the protector, and that changes everything. Thank you for walking with him. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. The serpent may have shaped his beginning, but the soul warrior will write the ending, and the phoenix rises from the ashes of everything the serpent tried to burn. Turn the page when you're ready. The story is just beginning. Sean Clark Christensen, the soul warrior, the serpent slayer, the phoenix risen. So mote it be. Afterword, a word on structure, series, and the soul's arc. If you've reached this page, you've completed the first leg of a longer journey, one that doesn't end with healing, closure, or triumph, but with something more honest, continuation. This book, The Two-Headed Serpent, Surviving a Narcissistic Mother, is the first of 3 volumes that together form a complete psychological and spiritual arc. Not because the story needs to be stretched across multiple books, but because survival, strength, and integration are 3 fundamentally different stages of becoming. You cannot skip any of them. Let me show you the map. The Two-Headed Serpent Trilogy, A Soul's Arc in 3 acts. Book 1, The Two-Headed Serpent, Surviving a Narcissistic Mother, the book you just finished. Function, Origin of the Wound, Life Stage, Childhood Adolescence. Narrative Lens, Inner Child plus Emerging Soul Warrior Voice. Core question, how did the serpent get inside me? Themes, psychological abuse, fear conditioning, abandonment and father loss, hypervigilance as a survival skill, emotional self-protection. Outcome, not healing, awareness. You finally see the pattern clearly. The monster wasn't you. It was the environment. The soul warrior is born in this book, but he is not yet strong. He is awake, witnessing, beginning to speak. Book 2, The Two-Headed Serpent, The Birth of the Soul Warrior, now available. Function, Forging of Strength, Life Stage, Late Teens, Navy, Early Adulthood. Narrative Lens, Child Fading, Warrior Strengthening. Core question, if I survived, who am I becoming? Themes, structure and discipline as lifelines, military brotherhood, competence and proving worth, choosing growth instead of collapse, learning to stand without apology. Outcome, not peace, power. You gain spine, agency, self-trust. The serpent loses control over your actions, but it still whispers in your thoughts. The warrior is awake now, strong, but not yet integrated with the wounded child he protects. Book 3, The Two-Headed Serpent, The Man Who Remained. Coming soon. Function, integration plus accounting, life stage, full adulthood, fatherhood, illness, mother's death. Narrative lens, warrior man, observer consciousness. Core question, after everything is stripped away, what remains of me? Themes, civilian life without military structure, failed marriages and custody battles, distance from children, fatherhood as redemption, health struggles and cardiomyopathy, mortality awareness, mother's death without closure, radical acceptance. Outcome, not victory, not closure, continuity. You don't defeat the serpent. You simply outlast it. The warrior becomes something quieter, deeper. The man, steady, present, no longer fighting ghosts, no longer proving anything, just remaining. The trilogy's psychological arc. Think of it this way. Book 1, Survival. I must endure. Book 2, Strength. I can fight. Book 3, Acceptance. I choose who I am. Each stage is necessary. You cannot become the man without first becoming the warrior. You cannot become the warrior without first being the child who survived. This is not a self-help series. It is a testimony spoken across 3 voices, 3 ages, 3 levels of awareness. And when the 3rd book ends, something remarkable happens. The spiritual bridge. What comes after? By the end of The Man Who Remained, the soul has processed childhood, built strength, accepted responsibility, released blame, authored its own identity. And now, finally, the soul is ready to ask a new question. What did this life teach me? That question is not rhetorical. It is the opening premise of the next series, Between Lives, where the man who survived the serpent reviews the life he lived, accounts for the choices he made, and prepares for what comes next. The Two-Headed Serpent trilogy equals life lived. Between Lives trilogy equals life reviewed. Clean handoff. No gap. A final word? If you recognize yourself in this first volume, know this. The inner child's testimony is complete, but the soul warrior's journey is just beginning. The 2nd book waits for you when you're ready. The 3rd will close the circle. And after that, the real questions begin. Thank you for bearing witness. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing the child who was never believed. The serpent shaped the beginning. But you will write the rest. The story continues. And I'll be here, holding the light. Sean Clark Christensen, the soul warrior, the serpent slayer, the man who remained. So mote it be.
About the author. Sean Clark Christensen is a survivor, father, and witness to the long war between trauma and transformation. Raised under the shadow of a narcissistic mother, he endured childhood abuse, parental alienation, and systemic abandonment before enlisting in the Navy at 19, not for patriotism, but for survival. A veteran of both military service and the silent battlefields of complex PTSD, Sean has spent decades learning what most never have to: how to protect the child within while becoming the man who protects others. He has worked as a laborer, a sailor, a father fighting for his sons in family court, and a man who chose to remain standing when every system told him to fall. Sean is the founder of Soul Anchor Publishing, a press dedicated to giving voice to those who survived by refusing to forget. Through his work, he explores the intersections of fatherhood, discipline, wealth building, spiritual awakening, and the psychology of narcissistic abuse. His books include The Toxic Soul, The Rushed Soul, 30 Things I Want You to Know About the Richest Man in Babylon, 30 Things I Want You to Know About Discipline, 30 Things I Want You to Know About AI, Sailor of Light, Big Swimmer, and the Young Man Academy, each written to equip fathers, sons, and survivors with the tools to reclaim their lives. The Two-Headed Serpent Chronicles is his testimony, not sanitized, not simplified, but spoken with the raw honesty of someone who survived by refusing to forget. Sean lives with the scars of cardiomyopathy, the grief of separated fatherhood, and the quiet strength of a man who outlasted the serpent that tried to consume him. He writes for the ones still fighting, the ones who were never believed, the ones who survived by becoming invisible and are now learning to stand without apology. This is his voice. This is his war. This is his reckoning.
You've reached the end of The Two-Headed Serpent, Surviving a Narcissistic Mother, the first book in the Two-Headed Serpent Chronicles by Sean Clark Christensen. Sean has chosen to make this audiobook free because survivors deserve access to truth without barriers. If it resonated with you, the journey continues in the next installment of the series. Books 2 and 3, along with Sean's additional works, are available on Amazon under author Sean Clark Christensen. Visit sclarkchristensen.com to explore the full catalog. If this book helped you, purchase the next one and leave a review on Amazon. Thank you for listening.